We're nearly ready. I'm just getting that YouTube live stream up and running. It's just about there.
Glad you're with us, Lyle.
Glad to be here.
My daughter-in-law in Connecticut is in the hospital being induced as we speak.
Oh, well,
Oh, wow.
we'll look forward to the exciting news. Thanks for stepping away to join us, even with that going on.
Well, I can't be there.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, it looks like the YouTube live feed is working. And I'm gonna get to our PowerPoint. And I think we're okay to start.
Okay. Welcome to our Planning Commission meeting for June 11th. We appreciate all the planning commissioners that are with us tonight, and we also welcome those of you who are either here as applicants or those of you who are interested in what's happening tonight and maybe wishing to make comments. So we will look forward to having your involvement as we move forward in the meeting. So with that, we will begin our meeting tonight. Our first item on the agenda is, as usual, the minutes from our May 28th Planning Commission meeting. Commissioners, have you all had a chance to look over those minutes? Are there any changes or corrections that need to be made to those?
Nope, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, Scott has made a motion to approve the minutes as written. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Steve. Any other discussion to those minutes? Anything else? If not, just all as a group, we will vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No one opposed. Okay, those minutes will stand approved. Our first item of business tonight is a conditional use permit for a major home occupation B for a private and group violin lessons at 545 East 250 North. For the Davis County Violin School, Mackenzie Clausen is the applicant. And we will start with a staff report by the staff.
Okay, so to introduce this, again, at 545 East 250 North, the applicant who lives in the home, highlighted here in yellow on the map, is hoping to do a business from her home. She apparently has much more musical talent than I do and is hoping to teach violin to children and other students from her home. Primarily, these will be one-on-one by appointment lessons, typically in afternoons after school time is when she would most often expect it. A couple, 2 or 3 days a week, likely she would see those. Normally in that case, it would be something that we just handle in-house as a permitted use. But she is also interested on occasion in hosting some groups to perform or practice performing together. And the groups may vary in size, but she think it would be just a couple times a month that she anticipates doing that. And you have to bear with me in lieu of juggling back and forth my typical location where I have some of my notes. I may be a little off from what our recommendation was, but based on my conversation with her, those primarily being drop-off situations, there may be the occasion where parents or two stays to watch the children practice. Our ordinance does require that we put a limitation on either the number of vehicles transporting people to and from the home business for group lessons or the number of students involved. And it was our recommendation to staff that we put a limitation to a number of, I believe it was 3 times a month that she could have group lessons, and also a limitation on the number of students to not exceed 10. And we also recommended with that there be a requirement, in particular when those group lessons are happening, of spacing the time frame so that there's time for pickup and drop off where they don't overlap. I know the commission's received some email and comments on this one with some concerns with traffic when the group lessons occur and how much that may occur. So if you'll recall those as you've read and take those in consideration, I'll close my remarks there and be happy to answer any questions of me if you have any.
Okay, commissioners, Any questions of staff? Lyle, I just have one quick one. So you're recommending 3 days a month. Would that mean that there could be multiple group lessons on those days?
That was my initial thinking. And the applicant maybe could speak to it further, but
Yeah.
my understanding was there wouldn't be many groups and it wouldn't be very frequent, but that she may have a couple small groups or one large group. So just to allow for some flexibility. So as you speak with the applicant or learn more about it, if you feel there's a need to modify that, that is your option as a commission to do so.
Okay. Other commissioners, questions?
Maybe for the applicant. but not this time.
All right. If there are no other questions, then let's go to the applicant and hear from Mackenzie Clausen. Uh-oh, did Lyle freeze up on us? I'm guessing that Lyle's feed froze up on us. Lyle, I don't know if you can hear us.
Yeah, I see Mackenzie raising her hand.
Yeah, Lyle's got to be the one to unfreeze or acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Mackenzie, hang tight for a minute. It looks like Lyle's got to probably reboot himself, and he's the meeting organizer, the meeting host. So we've got to get him back on so that he can authorize you to speak and others.
Hey, I just saw a message across that said, I don't know how, but it said, Commissioner Toby, you're the host now, so maybe you can take a look and oh, there she is.
Okay.
Yeah, I gave it. Yeah, go ahead.
Ms. Clausen, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So go ahead. We will hear from you now.
I don't have much to add. That was pretty accurate. I see mostly private students, and then every other week my students come and gather together to learn how to play in a group. So there usually is around 8 students, 5 to 8. So it's not very crowded. And usually there are some siblings in that group, so that's even less cars.
Oh, okay, good.
And I apologize, Ms. Clausen and Mr. Chair, we had a little bit of a glitch for a second here with our internet
Right.
connection. Did anybody? And I hate to have you do it twice, but if there's anything that needs to be repeated for anyone listening, we lost about 30 seconds of feed, or give or take. So it looks like we're up and running. So we'll
Okay,
go ahead
good.
and continue with that.
We actually heard from Ms. Clausen a little bit while I think you were trying to get back on, and the only thing she really said was just told us a little bit about her lessons are individuals mostly, and then every other week she has a group lesson or two, and has usually 8 students or so in those group lessons. That's about all we've heard at this point.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I assume if you all heard it, then that means everyone else attending did as well. So
Yeah, I'm assuming so.
thank you.
Okay, commissioners, any questions of Ms. Clausen?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Nguyen. Hi, Ms. Clausen, how you doing?
Great. Thank you. How are you?
Good. So one of the questions that came in had a couple questions, and I'll just read them off, and if you could answer that, that'd be great. How many group lessons will be held each week? Will there be up to 12 vehicles on our street for long periods of time? If yes, how long each day? I think we kind of addressed that with a limitation. Why can't these groups lessons be broken in half, say 6 people at a time, to limit the amount of traffic on the street? Again, I think we've also maybe addressed that with the limit of 10, but if you could, that'd be great. Answer those.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. Yeah, so it would be usually 2 in an evening. So I guess possibly there would be more cars as one lesson switches out to the other, but I could space those out.
Yeah, I think that's what this person is asking.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question. So have you been, it sounds like you may have been already been doing this for a little bit. And if, I guess that's the first question, number one. And then if so, have you had any comments or heard anything from the neighbors about it?
Yeah, I have been doing this since September, actually. I've been behind on applying for my license. I've never had any neighbors say anything to me about it.
That's all I had.
Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? If not, then while this is not a public hearing, we do and can allow those who may want to comment to do so. Lyle, do we have anybody who would like to comment on this?
Yeah, we've got a handful of attendees, so I'll just invite anybody who's interested in speaking to this item. In the bottom middle of your screen, if you move your mouse around, there should give you the option to raise your hand. If you will do that, then we'll announce when we've given you permission to speak and you may address the commission. So go ahead and take a few minutes if anybody would like to address the commission. Click on that raise hand feature and we'll watch for you. It looks like, Mr. Chair, I don't see any hand raises for this particular item.
Okay, thanks. And as was already noted, we did get an email or two on this, and I think we've addressed some of those comments that were made in those emails. All right, commissioners, we do have this proposal before us. Staff has made a recommendation to allow for this to take place with the limitation or with the condition that group lessons be allowed on 3 days of the month with no more than 10 students at a time, and that there must be at least 15 minutes between those group lesson sessions. Where are you all at on this? Any comments, discussion?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I think we should also add, just to address one of the neighbors' concerns, 15 minutes just in between lessons, since Ms. Clausen did say that it's possible that there might be 2 classes per evening.
Right. And that's part of the recommendation, I think, that the staff has made, 15 minutes between the group sessions.
Okay.
Any other comments, commissioners? All right, are we ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve conditional use permit for major home occupation B for private group and group lessons located at 545 East, 250 North for the Davis County Violin School for Mackenzie Clausen, with the recommendations that staff has made regarding limiting group lessons to 3 a month, 10 people per session, and then 15 minutes between group lessons.
Okay, Commissioner Kwan Nguyen has made a motion to allow for the conditional use application as applied for with the conditions as noted by the staff. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
I'll second that.
Let's see, who was it that seconded that?
Me or Toby?
No, let's take Scott. So Scott has seconded the motion. Toby, we'll get you on the next one.
That's fine.
Any other discussion to the motion, commissioners? Okay, hearing none, let's proceed with a vote. We'll start with Steve Lyon. Steve?
Aye.
Chair Summercorn, I vote aye. Toby?
Aye.
Jared?
He's muted.
Oh,
We got you there, Jared? There you are.
can you hear
There
me?
we go. Yep, we got it. Okay, aye for you. Scott?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
And Kwan?
Aye.
Okay, that is a unanimous vote for approving the home occupation. Thanks, Ms. Clausen. We appreciate your coming, and congratulations. Hope you have success with your violin lessons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for a rezone of 1.1 acres of property for the PRUD overlay zone, and then also for a preliminary plat at 1599 West Galbraith Lane. The applicant is Nathan Alvey. The owner of the property are Lamont and Carolee Anderson. So my understanding, well, let's go ahead and have Lyle go ahead and present on this. And Lyle, my understanding is that we're not changing the zoning. We're just putting the PRUD overlay zone on this, or that's what the application is.
That is the current request. The applicant will speak to even that a little bit and some of their ideas that they're thinking for the property as they have their turn. So just as noted by the chair, we're looking at two different items tonight. One is the actual PRUD, which simply allows, in this case, for the application of a flag lot style subdivision. And so it would remain in the RA zoning district based on the current request. You can see that that's the predominant zone on the north of this area, and then to the south, there's a lot of R120. So this is roughly half-acre lot size development here in this part of town. The proposal, there's an existing home on the lot, and anyway, the ability to do a flag lot on any zone requires that there be at least a 30-foot wide access to the back of the lot, as shown here. In addition to that access, we draw a new property line. Any home or dwelling is supposed to have a side yard or a yard requirement of at least 8 feet from that new lot line. So in order to accommodate that in this case, the applicant's aware of the requirement. They've shown the willingness to modify and remove a section of the home in order to meet that requirement. So as far as acreage under the zoning that's in place, access to the street, this shows improving the curb gutter sidewalk along that section in front of the existing home and the new lot. This would meet the typical standards for a flag lot. Again, because of the PRUD, the Planning Commission would be seeking to make a recommendation on that. And then the council, ultimately, you have broad discretion on whether or not you think it's appropriate in this particular location. So just because it meets all those minimum requirements does not make it so you have to approve it. Looking at this one on how it meets with the general plan, does it make sense in the specific neighborhood? We have had a handful of comments and emails come through that the commission has received regarding this item. Concerns on the use of the lot, adding extra homes in the area, among other things. And also one of the common concerns that came up was some of the standing water that's taking place, particularly on the south end of this lot, essentially midway between Loyola and Galbraith. So that's something that we're aware of as staff that has occurred in this area. I think at this point, speaking with our public works department, we're not positive one way or another that this is going to exacerbate that and make it worse, or it could be an opportunity with part of the development maybe to offer some solution to it as well. So I think, certainly an item of discussion for consideration for the commission. What I would say is if there's interest in the commission in pursuing this, it may be something at the table. We can get more information for you on that. It could be appropriate to simply saying, okay, come back to us at final plat and show us how you've addressed that or other concerns that you may have. So that's just one way to handle it. Again, it may be that you need to table it or you don't feel it fits the area. You do have the option to deny this type of request as well because of the PRUD. And then the applicant, I think will speak to it as after submitting this and he and I having some discussion, he's wondering about maybe getting a little bit of flexibility on where this lot line is between the two lots and had some ideas with that. But I think, again, is looking tonight to continue with the commission on the consideration of the flag lot. And we'll speak to maybe utilizing an R120 or potentially different zoning designation if that direction is appropriate to give a little bit of wiggle room on exactly where those lot lines are drawn. So with that, I'll close my remarks, let them perhaps speak to that a little further. And I do have an exhibit that shows that as they're ready for your discussion.
Okay, thanks, Lyle. So questions of Lyle. I have one, Lyle, right off the bat. First of all, you're saying that this proposal does meet the requirements for a flag lot in our ordinance as it exists. Is that right?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. So the PRUD section of the ordinance has minimum requirements that are typical. This meets all of those. There aren't within the flag lot section of the PRUD exemptions from that through any means. And so it meets based on its underlying zone, those specifications.
So if it meets the requirements for the flag lot, what is the reason for needing a PRUD overlay?
So the reason is just because it meets the requirements doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing for the area. And so historically, the city had approved these via conditional use and allowing discretion on when you said yes or no to this type of development. Some people love flag lots, some people don't. It may cause some, I don't know, unwanted issues or something that they felt needed individual consideration. And so to allow that continued discretion as to when to apply these, years ago, before my time, the city took it out of a conditional use process and made an overlay zone the method for considering them. So it's that legislative action of the overlay that allows you that ability.
I see. So
is
in order to get a flag lot, you have to have a PRUD overlay.
That is correct. So if the PRUD is approved, then it meets all the minimums. Perhaps is a better answer to your original question.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you. Commissioners, other questions?
Yeah, I had a question just about the process. If you look immediately east and immediately west, it appears that this is surrounded by 6 flag lots of very similar size and shape. I mean, just the lots in both directions, if you look at the aerial image, are almost identically shaped to this. Are those individually part of a PRUD, or was that part of the original subdivision as proposed? I mean, I'm seeing as you go east, you know, the next door neighbor of the new lot, the one, their next door neighbor, and the other one accessed off the circle. And then as you go west, the same exact thing. You've got a little bit wider east to west flag light, another, and then another. So how were those approved? Similar process or not? Because I'm just seeing when, you know, you ask the question, is this right for this area? It looks perfectly right and in line with what's happening out there.
Yeah, so Commissioner Lyon is pretty familiar with the area, so he was going to.
Scott, I lived right across the street from this. So the 2 to the east, or the 3 lots to the east is Pettengill's development. He owned all of that. That was a 2 acre that he subdivided into each quarter acre, each half acre parcels. So that was each divided. He had the 130 foot frontage on each of them to do it. So it was actual subdivision of his 2 acre parcel there. To the west, where you're talking, it was similar. It was one person who subdivided it, similar in that area, and then sold them as individual lots.
All right.
Other questions? Let's go ahead and hear from the applicant then. Would that be Mr. Albee, Nathan Albee?
Yeah, so he's raising his hand. Yeah, Mr. Albee, we're just giving you permission now. Once you're unmuted, you're welcome to address the commission.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you for everybody's time this evening. I thought Commissioner Hess made a perfect spokesman for myself. Very observant. There are 3 adjacent flag lots to the east, 3 adjacent flag lots to the west. If this were to be approved, there would be 7 flag lots in a row. So I'm not trying to blaze a trail or be a pioneer on any of this. I'm being a copycat and just meeting the requirements to be able to have a lot to build upon. As Lyle referenced, the plat that was submitted had the existing home with a half acre, and the dividing line between the existing lots and the new lot. We were hoping if this flag lot was approved as appropriate for the area, of having a little bit of flexibility on where that line would be drawn. Currently, the way this is drawn, there are 93 feet from the back of the existing home to where the property line is drawn. Pretty excessive setback. And that existing home would measure in at a half an acre. Ideally, we would like to be able to move the lot line 18 feet, which leaves lot number 1 at 0.46 acres and gives us a little bit more flexibility, a little bit bigger building area for the back lot, and still fill it. So we'd be looking at the way this is drawn, it would be an R120 zone, and just feel it would be more appropriate for the new home that would be built there and still leave a significant amount of backyard for the existing home.
So Mr. Alvey, are you asking then for the R120 zone as well?
That would be a subsequent application, would be my understanding, since I failed to specify that originally.
Okay.
Lyle could speak to the official procedures. I don't know if it'd be tabled tonight or if it would be voted on the flag lot as being appropriate. If we get the flag lot approved and then come back for an R120, I almost even wonder if the R120 is necessary, because everything to the north is zoned the same, and they're on 1/3 of an acre lots, as I was kind of looking. But whatever's appropriate to meet the city's requirements. That second preliminary plat that Lyle showed with the grayed out areas, ideally the end product that I'd be looking for.
So tonight, what we have before us is just the PRUD rezone application, and then the preliminary plat with the, as shown. And we can proceed with that, but if your real desire is to do something different, you may want to consider, withdrawing your application at this point and modifying it, and then asking for the R120 and the modified plat. But it's really up to you how you want to proceed on this. If we recommend approval on this tonight, and then it'd still have to go to the city council for their approval, then you'd have to go through the process again to change it to the R120.
I'm looking for the most efficient route and leaning on city staff and the commission for the best way to do that. Again, it's just a minor tweak, but with what the public notice officially had reference to, the end product I would like to tweak slightly as discussed.
If that's the case and you're looking for the most efficient, I would say hold off on tonight and modify your application and come back and allow for all of the re-advertising and so on. So it's a rezone to R120 and the PRUD, then you don't have to go through the process twice. But that's really up to you.
Okay, Lyle, do you agree with that, or were we looking for a little bit more input from the council as to whether this would be appropriate, if they had any concerns?
Yeah, my comments would be it could go either way. So I felt because it was noticed as the public hearing for this evening, as is stated by the chair and other commissioners, we have to consider what's before you. We can't consider the R120.
Right.
It's up to the commission as to whether or not you would like to give any indication as to, yeah, the flag lot's something that makes some sense. So go forth and start over with the other process. I think it could be this evening if the direction is, don't waste your time, we don't have any interest in a flag lot here, then that would be telling that we don't need to have him put in a new application and come back. So I think it's up to the commission how much you're willing to show your cards there. Then absolutely, I think we'd, maybe I defer to you, Mr. Chair. If it's simply being withdrawn to table, then no decisions being made as to whether or not public comment is necessary to accept this evening. But I think
we could certainly move forward with this application and see where it goes. And then based on where we wind up, then the applicant can decide whether he wants to proceed on to the council or whether he would like to start the process over again and go on to the R120. So if, and that kind of sounds like what you're looking for. So if that's the case, then I'd say let's go ahead and see where we wind up with this as far as the Planning Commission is concerned tonight.
Thank you. Sounds great.
Commissioners, anybody have any objection to that? Okay, not hearing any objection then. Mr. Alvey, anything else?
I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm looking forward to some feedback and some input and seeing where the commission stands.
Okay, commissioners, any questions of Mr. Alvey?
Yeah, I had one other additional question. The flag lot doesn't concern me nearly as much as the standing water and the drainage and the runoff. And just interested in, is it a grading issue? Is their soil like mine out here in West, where I'm at in West Kaysville, that you could pour a bucket of water on it and the soil just literally holds it, it doesn't drain away? And what are the, what kind of mitigation? I think that before I felt comfortable approving a final plat, I would want to be real sure that that you were mitigating to the best, availability to keep the water on the property and not have it affect the neighbors, like it appears to be.
Okay, thanks. Scott, any other comments, commissioners, or questions?
Commissioner Doxey's got a question.
Yes, go ahead, Jared.
I know where we're at in Sunset Equestrian Estates, we've had the same problem, and several neighbors got together and worked with the city and got some form of an area drain or a French drain that was put in behind 4 or 5 homes to take care of a ponding problem in a bunch of people's backyard. Has the city engineer looked, Lyle, at doing something like that to solve the problem on the standing water? That seems to be the concern most of the neighbors have brought up.
And so I walked out there last night. I know some of the issues have been alleviated the past few years once Houston Court went in, which is to the east of there, when they put the drainage in for that road. And then once those lots have come in and been leveled, particularly the ones to the east, the Pettingill Estates. But I don't know, I mean, the last couple of years, the neighbors to the east all said that the water hasn't been cooling there. The other question I had, and this goes to the same issue of water, is the existing septic tank still in the ground behind the home? That home had the Anderson home had an existing septic that drained out into that back area where we're talking about all that water. Is that septic tank, when they went on sewer about 8 to 10 years ago, has that septic tank been removed? That's the second question I have. And are you going to mitigate that in your, so the homeowner doesn't have to worry about that going forward in part of this mitigation for water?
That's a question for Mr. Alvey, I assume, Steve?
That's a question for him.
Okay. I live about a mile north of this property right now, so I'm not familiar with any standing water. I could speculate what's going on there. Walking it, it's definitely a very flat area. French drain sounds like a very simple solution. With regards to the septic tank, I'm not certain whether it was removed, but the existing home definitely has tied into the city sewer system. My experience with removing septic tanks is generally they're pumped out and then they're crushed and filled with cement and capped. So I would speculate that it was either removed or that it was pumped out, crushed, filled with cement, and then capped would be my speculation, but that's not all it is speculation. I can't speak with 100% certainty on that.
And I can answer another portion of that question for Commissioner Doxey. This particular neighborhood, almost the exact same time as your neighborhood, came before the council with concerns about the water ponding in their backyards. And the city did come to an agreement of some variety with that community as far as what level of participation we were willing to offer to help filter that water out into our storm drain system, essentially through land drain design. So I think something was designed. The city, as I recall, was willing to make the connections from our storm drain, kind of just the initial stubs, into the properties along Leola. So we didn't build the land drain system ourselves, but here's the access point where that could tie into. You guys go build the rest. And so I'm not positive to date what, if anything's been done by that community to tie into that, but I believe that was the resolution at that time. We could continue to get more information for you if needed on the specifics. But yeah, it is something.
All right, Lyle, that was a $20,000 to $30,000 fix. So those neighbors must have had to pool together to come up with the money, and then this sounds like the city allowed them to tie into the storm drain. So it was
That's
not
my
a
recollection.
fix.
That's my recollection is, yeah, we put that on them to take care of the pipe and stuff. And I don't know the exact dollar amount, but you're probably in the ballpark. And yeah, we were just simply going to provide a point where they could tie it into and accept their water.
So it sounds like something like that needs to be considered for this situation to alleviate the concerns of the neighbors, is the point I'm making.
Right.
And that would be a very good thing to raise if and when we get to the preliminary plat stage on this. Sounds like that's certainly an issue of concern.
And I suspect
Okay.
we'll probably have a neighbor or two that maybe knows a little bit more of the details as well with the system. Looks like we have at least one hand up.
Well, let's see. Let me just check quickly again. Are there any other questions from the commissioners?
I mean, I have a comment, but what's your next step, Will?
Next step will be for the public comment, public hearing.
Okay, so I'll save it till after.
Okay. All right. If there are no other questions or comments of the applicant, then this is a public hearing. It has been advertised as a public hearing for the rezone request or the zoning request for the PRUD overlay to allow for the flag lot and for the preliminary plat. So as it is shown as has been submitted and we have in the application. So with that, we will turn to those who are here and maybe wishing to comment. We have received a number of emails, I will note that, and they will be entered into the record as comments that we have received on this application. As some of the commissioners have already noted, a number of those emails raised the concern about the water. And then some others have raised concerns about the fencing and the location of the driveway and some of the other things, which are things that we could certainly consider and look at it at the preliminary plat stage when we get to that. So with the note being made that we have those comments already from the emails, let's go to the public, Lyle, and see who we have here to comment. And I would ask you as those who comment, please try to keep your comments brief. Address the issues that we have in front of us. In other words, the rezones of the PRUD and even to the preliminary plat that's been submitted. And just be aware that we have other items on the agenda that we do need to get to. And so try to keep your comments brief. If somebody has made a comment that you would agree with, it's perfectly fine. And in fact, we would encourage you to say, I agree with those comments from the previous person. So with that, Lyle.
Yeah, it looks like we've got two hands so far. Richard Collard, I show you at the top of my list here. So we're giving you permission to speak now. Just as soon as you're unmuted, please address the commission.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I live what would be the backyard of this particular lot. And I do have a lot of, what's that?
Could you give us your address?
Yeah, it's 1606 Leola Street.
Thank you.
So I have major concerns with the standing water, and I understand that there are flag lots in the area. However, some of those flag lots have caused some of my neighbors to have flooding. And I would say excessive flooding, talking about several feet in their backyards. So that's my biggest concern. I'm not opposed to having a flag lot there, but I want all the water issues addressed. My second comment is the Houston Court area was approved, and after that, that's when the flooding started for my neighbors. And yes, the city went in and proposed to tie into the city drainage, but put it upon my neighbors to fund getting the water to that point. So I don't want to be imposed upon to put up any kind of money to land that is not, the water's not coming from my land. So why should I have a new flag lot? I think that should be either paid for by the city or paid for by the lot owner. And I would recommend that you do to some of my neighbors on Leola Street and talk to them.
Mr. Collard, I think we've lost your,
before you
there we
vote
go.
upon.
Go ahead. We got you back. Go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know where you lost me. I don't know what I said last.
I think we're getting the gist of it. So you're fine. Just go on ahead.
Okay, those are really my concerns. You know, and I don't know if, anyway, yeah, those are just my biggest concerns.
Okay, great. No, appreciate that. Thank you very much. Lyle?
Looks like the next one with the hand raised is Trent Nelson. Trent, we're getting you some permission to speak here. Go ahead and unmute yourself and address the commission.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. First of all, to the commissioners, thanks for your service. It's not a glorious position, but I appreciate it. It's the tough decisions you have to make. I think there's wisdom in the process. There's a lot of flag lots along that road off of Galbraith, but it's set up to go through the PRUD process to give discretion, because not every lot, even if it's next to one that is a flag lot, makes sense. And maybe this is part of being the last one in this area, I don't know. But drainage is an issue. Let me just clarify what standing water, how I understand it. People talk about standing water on this lot. That's not the problem. The problem is water leaving that lot onto everyone else's property. The house immediately to the east of that lot, it's off a little cul-de-sac off of Galbraith. Now, it's been a dry spring. It's been a dry spring, and unreasonably so. But that house consistently has water on other years in their backyard. They actually had a wild family of ducks living in their backyard because they had over a foot, about 6 to 8 inches at least of water in their flower beds and on the grass. So this is not a standing water issue on the property, subject property. It's because it flows to other places and has nowhere else to go. This is a flooding problem. I think that's why the PRUD process is appropriate, because you guys can say, no, this is not appropriate in this situation. If Mr. Aldry gets approval and everything works well and we get a solution to this drainage problem, I'm going to bring him cookies over and welcome to the neighborhood. Even if I don't get my wishes, I'm still going to welcome to the neighborhood. But the problem is we know it's a problem. We should not go forward at all until there's a viable solution. Now, the stuff that happened farther east off of Houston Court, I'm not trying to scare you, but that's coming back. There are going to be rainy years again, and that flooding is going to come. They held off doing the solutions because it's all expense, but that's going to come back. There is literally, I think it was 2 feet of water in one person's backyard, 2 feet deep. They couldn't even have their kids play in the backyard because of how much water. So that's what's happening with some of these developments off of Galbraith. They don't have solutions at the time of development, and the problems come after. We already know there's a problem. My house has personally been flooded from water that was flowing, not just off of Anderson's property, Mr. Alvey's proposed property, but it's through there and from there. That, if you go back and look at that, the house immediately to the west again is lower. There is no way you're going to be able to put in a new house there without bringing in fill and having the slope off of the new house. There's literally no way that runoff is going to stay on there. It cannot happen. It will not stay there unless you build like a 10-foot drainage pond around, like a moat around his house. It's going to flood the neighbors. You can't do it. I'm not an engineer, but it's pretty straightforward. It's already happening. When you bring in a house, there's no way he's going to put the house lower than the neighbor's property. So this is a problem. What I would propose is simply say, hey, look, until you come up with a viable plan that passes our engineer's approval, that it works, don't even go any farther because it's not appropriate. We know it's going to flood. Now, is that unfortunate for Mr. Anderson? He's not making some of the money that other people have had, potentially, but he is the lowest and he is the last, and there's houses around him and it will flood. I do like some of the comments like Commissioner Hess talked about, keeping the water on his own property. I'm not very smart. You can probably figure that out already, but I don't know how he can do that. unless he proposes a significant program or a system to drain this and get it out to the road. So you guys have the discretion. I would say don't go forward. The farther you go forward, the harder it is to stop. More people, more money is expended, more emotions involved, it's harder to stop. I would say this is not viable right now until you come up with a plan. Even if you come back with your plan that says R20 now, but until you come back with a viable plan, this is not appropriate here and it should be denied. So thank you for listening to me. I do live, sorry, one last thing. I do live just south. I live next to Mr. Collard that was just speaking. I share about 12 feet of acreage, 12 feet of land connection to the subject property. But again, the gentleman that's just to the west, by far, he is so much worse off than me, so much worse. I talked to him about this and he wasn't sure how to get on the internet, but he wanted to do this tonight, but I'm not representing him, but I wanted to make sure you realize how low his property is. And I'm sure if you go out there and look at it, you'll say, wow, this is a problem. So even without water there right now, it's a problem because it will come back. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Nelson. Did we get your address?
I apologize. 1614 Leola Street.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Lyle, do we have anyone else?
Hey, yeah, Kyle and Jennifer Burke, raise their hand. You're next. Make sure you're unmuted and it's your turn.
All right, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So we live at 1609 Galbraith Lane. So we live right next to the home. We're just to the west of it. And we definitely agree with everything that's already been said about water runoff. But our biggest concern is the privacy and safety of our backyard. We recently purchased this home. It was 6 months ago that we purchased this home. And so, you know, at the time it was a very private, safe backyard, but with a road, you know, going right past and in right by our backyard, we just I wouldn't feel comfortable sending my toddler out to play in our own backyard. So we would request that a fence be put in on the property line, one that is vinyl or, you know, that is a privacy fence that appeals to the aesthetic around. That's our biggest and main concern.
Okay. We appreciate that. Thanks very much. Okay, Lyle, anyone else?
We'll just show one more, Thomas Wright. And Thomas should have permission here in a second. Go right ahead when you need.
Okay, I'm not Thomas, I'm Tammy, but can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Okay, Tom is right here next to me. We just wanted to say that we agree with what the others, our lot is the one that was referred to as the host home of the wild ducks. You know, and
could you give us your address?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's 1619 Galbraith Lane.
Okay, thank you.
And we really agree with this, unless there can be something done to help with the standing water issue. I mean, we get it all the time. As we wrote in the email, you know, we built our garden feature up because it was clear that if we put it at ground level, it was going to wash away or flood. As I mentioned, we lost fruit trees, 3 of them, due to standing water in the backyard. You know, it just has to be a concern for, I think, everybody as far as this goes, because I think that it really hurts our own property values when everybody in the neighborhood knows that there's a water issue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Lyle, any others?
It looks like that's everybody who's got interest for this particular item, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, all of those who have spoken to us. We will turn back to Mr. Alvey, to the applicant, for any response that he may have.
Thank you for the feedback from hopeful future neighbors. I'd love to get those cookies, Trent. So my field of expertise, what I do every day. I remodel homes, I build homes. Water is the enemy of homes. Water is something to be taken seriously. My comments and thoughts as I'm hearing all this issue right now, that water, if it's already there, it's coming from all of the existing homes runoff from where they're running their gutters, so all the water coming off of their roof. I would hope that I could provide a solution to that in this process. I hope I'm not burdened with having to carry 100% of the load, but as we're running a sewer line to the back property of the flag lot, as we're running other utilities, we definitely will have some trenches there with the city's permission. If we have the opportunity to tie into a storm drain, that would be fantastic. If the city doesn't want to permit that, then we'd have to look into a French drain option. But I don't want to build a home where there's going to be a water issue. So I'd love to come talk to the neighbors and get a better understanding of what the problems are, but the problem won't be resolved by my new home all by itself. If there's as much water as everybody is referencing, it's because of where the rain gutters from current homes are currently directed and running.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Alvey. With that, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll turn now to the commission for discussion and action. Let me just, by way of introduction on this part of it, just indicate the flag lot provisions that are in the city ordinances, normally under an administrative procedure, if the applicant could meet the requirements for the flag lot, they would be entitled to approval. However, the city's ordinance does specify that they have to have a PRUD overlay zone in order to even apply for the flag lot. And that is a discretionary legislative type of decision. So commissioners, we do have the ability here to recommend approval or non-approval based on whether we think this is a good idea or not, rather than just the specifics of whether it meets the criteria and the standards in the ordinance. So we obviously do want to look at those standards as well, but we also have the ability to look at this and say, is this a good idea or not? So with that, I want to turn to Commissioner Sundloff. Josh, you were saying that you wanted to make a statement earlier. You want to do that now?
Yeah, I have two comments. The first one is really echoing of what I think was at least implied in some comments earlier, I think, which is I agree that the flag lot is not a concern. It's more than just the fact that this lot is being proposed at more than half an acre. It's a flag lot that's that is consistent with the neighborhood. So that's the first point. I think for me, there's no issue there. And then the second one, I agree, water is an important concern. Water is a concern on this that it appears is a problem, and one that we should try to solve. I, in a past life, as a landscape architect, did do some design of drainage and storm drainage, and so not committing to anything, but engineering this on the fly. I think if I look at the survey, there's the slope of this, the elevation of the storm drain out in Galbraith Lane, and then looking at the elevations of existing elevations in the lot, it looks to me like there will be enough drainage, just barely enough to meet the minimum slope of storm drain to actually allow this to drain into the city's storm drain system. So of course that would need to be confirmed through proper civil engineering and those things. I think that would be the best solution in my mind, is if we could dump it into the city's storm drain in Galbraith Lane. But I also am mindful of the applicant's concern that if this is in fact water from surrounding properties and areas, which I think it makes sense that it is, does that mean, or could the city actually, is the proper legal question, can we impose all of the cost burden onto this one property owner to take care of not only their own water issue within the confines of their lot, but the other water that comes onto this lot? I think the answer to that is no, and I would suggest that the city try to work with the applicant on some solution there. But so just to make a long story short, in summary, number one, I think it fits with the area, and number two, I think the engineering and the water issues can be solved through proper engineering. And I would say the city should work with the applicant to find a solution that doesn't put all of the cost burden onto only the applicant.
Thanks, Josh. All right, other commissioners? Discussion, comments? Where are we at on this?
I would agree with Commissioner Sundloff. I mean, it seems like that I would agree with the, since it's consistent, there's other flag lots in the area, that seems to make sense that this would be okay to have a flag lot here. And it seems like the water issues are existing already, so the neighbor should share in that burden of, you know, trying to solve the problem and not fall on the applicant. So I'd agree with that point as well.
Okay.
Commissioner Doxy, I also agree with Commissioner Sundloff that you can engineer this and you can solve the problem. The question is, how much does it cost and who's going to pay? And I think that needs to be answered before we can go forward, because it's a sensitive issue. No one likes to pay too much in these kind of situations. And I do agree, it's not fair to put it on one person, because everyone's yard is by code is pushes the water away from their home, and it does go someplace. And so get it engineered, and whatever support the city can give, that's not something I could answer, but I do think it's a shared situation that people need to work out.
And, you know, and I think you all are right about the engineering issues, and I think that can be addressed at the preliminary plat stage, where we indicate that this is a concern. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. The engineering needs to take place, and possibly a cooperative arrangement made with the city to deal with water, maybe even in a broader area than just this particular lot. If we decide to go that direction, if we move forward with this, so appropriate for the preliminary plat review and approval. Other comments?
Given that there may be a request to go to R120, and maybe that is being pulled off of the table, but it just feels like there's a lot of questions with this particular one. And it's one I think that, especially since we're looking at a legislative request and it is in our purview, that tabling it might make sense for the applicant to go out, explore the issues, speak to the neighbors, actually look at it on site. You know, we were emailed images of standing water, so there's at least reference images of what they're dealing with out there, and then let the applicant do a little more due diligence and bring it forward with a fuller request with a little bit more information behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with what you're saying, Scott. I think one way to handle this so that the applicant has a little bit more a surety or some sense of where things are going is, I think we could maybe look at making a recommendation on the rezone, which would give an indication as to whether we're willing on the flag lot, and then you know, discuss the preliminary plat, and if we want some additional issues addressed, we could table the preliminary plat until some additional issues can be addressed, or something like that.
And I suspect, Mr. Chair, with that direction, I think that could be very appropriate for those neighbors listening. If that's the direction that's taken, it sounds like for the applicant's interest, there'll probably be a new application made, new notice sent, and you're probably seeing the rezone anyway. They would have the option to pursue the PRUD without an R120. Sounds like likely they'll come back with the R120. Is it pretty much the same conversation, right? But it would just allow for that 20,000 square foot consideration.
Other comments? Are we ready for any kind of a motion? I would say let's address the PRUD zoning overlay request first, in which case we would be making a recommendation to the council on that.
So I'll make a motion, given the discussion about the apparent applicability of a flag lot in this particular area, given the surrounding neighborhood. the surrounding flag lots, I would recommend to the city council approval of a PRUD overlay zone for applicant Nathan Alvey at 1599 West Galbraith Lane as outlined in the staff report. I don't think that there are any other underlying conditions on that, at least for the recommendation for the rezone.
The only one I might add or ask you to consider, Scott, is we did get a comment in one of the emails that we had where someone saying they would really like to see this limited only to a flag lot, that they could not do other things like increase density or do something with the PRUD.
Yeah, I think that, yep, and that's a good friendly suggestion. I would approve it that way. Recommendation for approval for the PRUD overlay for a flag lot to be consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, only for a flag lot that would appear consistent or be constructed consistent with the neighborhood. Lyle, can you make sense of that motion?
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
All right, Toby has seconded that motion. Now, commissioners, any further discussion to the motion? If there's no further discussion, then let's do a roll call vote. We'll start this time with myself. I vote aye. Toby?
Aye.
Jared?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Quan?
Aye.
And Steve?
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously to recommend approval of the PRUD overlay for this property with a limitation of it being for a flag lot only. All right, let's address the preliminary plat. That is also part of this application. So where are we at on the preliminary plat, folks?
I know, I'm sorry, I've talked a lot and I'll give somebody else time next time. So I agree. I know that this is a one-off subdivision but you know, almost all subdivisions that we're seeing on the west side do come with a fencing provision. I think that's pretty common. I think that's, you know, respectful for the impacts to the neighborhood. So I don't know if we table it, but give suggestions like I'm leaning towards we table the item, but give some clear direction to the applicant. And that would be things like coming back with a plan with some basic engineering for even can this drain the water off of its own property. I can't commit this one flag lot to fixing the issues for the entire neighborhood. But what I would say is that we would want to mitigate any impacts that this one lot, this one additional home, the addition of this hard surface area would have on the surrounding neighbors. And I think that that is water that we should be able to mitigate, engineer out, and have the applicant consider how to help. That coupled with I think that the fencing requirement would be appropriate if that's something that we can in the ordinance approve as part of the plat. And I'm not sure if that's a line above what we have a ruling to do, but that's the direction that I'm currently leaning.
I'd agree with that. I think it makes sense. I think we also need some more information back on this one before we can move ahead with the plat motion and on that one.
So what specific information would we be looking for, commissioners? Are we looking for more detailed engineering level data on the drainage situation?
I think so.
Okay.
Whether that's showing the trench or showing the drainage, having the agreement in place from the city that this can tie into stormwater, having even a confirmation letter from an engineering firm that says after looking at the grading on the lot, we think that we can design it via these mitigating factors. Something to that effect. If the applicant can get an assurance without going down the entire road of having it entirely engineered to get over this one item, but that water coming off of somebody else's property is really an impact that the neighbors shouldn't have to bear. And if it's at all, mitigatable then we should do our best to try to do that.
This is Commissioner Doxey. When I was on the HOA board for Sunset Equestrian Estates, we had 3 different situations like this. We worked with the city in all 3. The city allowed us to dump into the storm drain. And in all 3 cases, we solved the water ponding with French drains. And it worked beautifully in all 3 cases. And the average cost for each one was around $4,000 or $5,000. The $20,000 to $30,000 was 5 or 6 homes that had the pond in between their backyards. And that was the big hit. But we had other ponding issues in different areas and French drains, and it wasn't crazy expensive, and it did a beautiful job. So I'll just offer that out as solutions over here in West Kaysville that worked in this subdivision.
Okay. And then I think in addition to the engineering, we also have the issue of the fencing on the south side, which, you know, I don't have a problem saying stipulating. And I mean, we can get to that when we do the final approval for this preliminary plat, or the preliminary plat approval. And the other design considerations that are shown on there, I don't know that anyone really has any issues with those. Any other comments, discussion?
I just have a follow-up. I'm not generally opposed to, you know, the comments that everyone's making. I guess I would only add or throw in the idea that could we move it along and like approve a preliminary plat and still accomplish all the or address all the concerns, say that you know, Scott mentioned, and by that I mean, you know, could we recommend approval of a preliminary plat, or are we? I think we might just be approving a preliminary plat and say, so long as the engineering can be you know, worked out, or I mean, it would literally take Ensign probably a matter of minutes to say yes, if the city allows us to dump into the storm drain, which I don't see why the city wouldn't. Yes, we can do that, and then we don't need to come back. Just let them proceed ahead and give us a final plat. Yeah, that's my comment.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good comment, Josh.
I also think, though, we're going to see this come back with an R120 overlay.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility that would happen.
I think this gives the applicant wiggle room to come back with that, when the renotice on that, instead of doing the approval and then having to come back and renotice again.
Right.
So I guess refresh my memory. Maybe I wasn't following or listening or something, but whether it's R120 or whether it's as it's proposed now, how does that change? You know, that it seems it fits either way.
They'll just have to resubmit the rezone application, do another rezone application, and then we'll have a different preliminary plat to look at because they'll change the lot configuration. So we'll have to do a preliminary plat approval again. So we'll basically have to do a rezone and a preliminary plat again for this if they decide to change it.
And that so the applicant would be wanting to make a smaller lot? Is that what the R120 would be?
Yeah, he was talking about shortening up the rear lot line for the lot 1 and putting that below the minimum size threshold in the RA zone, and thereby going to the R120 zone, which would make a bigger lot 2 and a smaller lot 1 there. Lyle has just put that up on the screen. That's what they're thinking of doing, but that's not what they're applying for at this very time.
Mm-hmm.
So that would all have to come back to us if they decide to move that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, commissioners, are we about there? Anybody ready to make a motion on this preliminary plat?
I move that we table it.
You want to put any stipulations with that, Steve, what they need to do?
I just think, as I'm sitting here, Yes, and then when it comes back, we want to see it with, and when it comes back, we want to see it with the engineering for stormwater. And then also, as Commissioner has said, with at least some planning, preliminary planning for some fencing and some privacy between the neighbors. Did I get it, Scott?
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Scott has seconded that motion. Discussion to the motion, commissioners. You know, with the tabling, I mean, I think I'd be inclined to agree with Josh that they could proceed forward with it. But if the applicant really is inclined to change this to the R120 zone, they're going to come back anyway. So in essence, it's like tabling it. So I don't know, I'm a little bit torn which way I vote. I think I would normally vote to not table this and move forward just with the recommendations that they settle the engineering issues with regard to drainage. But if they're going to rezone anyway, they'll have to come back again, and we've accomplished the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Any other comments, commissioners, discussion on this? All right, with that, then let's go to a vote. Toby, we will start with you. The motion is to table.
Aye.
Toby votes aye. Jared?
Aye.
Scott? You're voting aye? You're nodding your head. I don't know why we can't hear you, but okay, so Scott has voted aye. Josh?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. Josh?
Aye.
Josh votes aye. Quan?
Aye.
Quan votes aye. Steve?
Aye.
Steve votes aye, and I will vote aye as well. So we have tabled the preliminary plat with the stipulations that the engineering issues be resolved and that additional information be given on the fencing and screening issues. All right. That does it. And then Mr. Albee, you can decide whether you want to change this and try to go for the R120 zoning as well, and that's up to you. All right.
Thank you to all of you. I have to say this is the best group of commissioners I've seen across multiple cities here along the Wasatch Front. This is a smart group, and I applaud you all. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your saying that and not saying it before the decision. All right. Let's move on to our next item on the agenda. This is a public hearing for a rezone of 14 acres of property at 1773 West 200 North from the A5 Heavy Agricultural District to the R110, R114, R16 single family zones, and to the R2 1 and 2 family residential zones with a PRUD overlay zone for each of the districts. The applicants are Nephi and Malcolm Harvey. So with that, let us get the staff report. Lyle?
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate and if you'd concur, the following item is the same topic. If we'd like to introduce that as well, it's the consideration of the preliminary plat.
Oh, do we have a plat here as well?
And we can discuss them all together. I think it's all related.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do this as a public hearing then combined for both the rezones and the preliminary plat.
Thank you. So as stated with the introduction here at 1773 West, 200 North, the property which is on the south side of 200 North Street, just a little ways west of the rail trail and the Smith's Marketplace. You can see here on the map outlined in yellow. Roughly 14 acres of property north of what Symphony Homes is currently developing. You can see the new streets on this. They're further along than that at this point, but Morning West Lane and 75 South Street to the west that stub into this as well. In consideration of what the applicant and property owners are interested in doing with the property, several zoning districts have been proposed. Part of that, after seeing their interest in what they hope to accomplish, primarily my suggestion from staff. For me, it's easier to administer and it's more clear and predictable what types of developments may occur if we do these different phases, as you'll see, under different zoning districts, rather than maybe an R2 or something for the whole thing and going with that. So you can see probably better with the concept plan what they're hoping to propose and pursue for development of the property. There are kind of darker lines outlining different sections, which would essentially be phased components of the development. Off of 75 South Street, an R110 zone is proposed. As most of the lots are larger than that, but the smallest of the lots in that area is just over 10,000 square feet. They're all off of a public, standard public right-of-way that ultimately is stubbed and lined up to connect forward towards 200 North, adjacent from on Seymour, I think it is, to the north. So we've asked them to, as they consider developing this, make sure those are aligned, and they were obliged us with that and lining that up. Other phases of the development, the R114, which is just north of this, has homes again at 14,000 square feet or larger. A couple under the concept front, the public right-of-way. It's a standard public right-of-way, but then they also show a private street cul-de-sac that would access those lots. Again, there's an R16 section, which accounts for these 6 lots right in the middle of the development. And the remaining R2 zone, as requested, was for the purpose of accommodating this section on the east, which is a townhome style, single-family attached product with open space. So there are, I don't have my notes here in front of me on the phone, it's not going, but 55 units in that particular phase. The other phases, you can count a little more quickly, 9, 8, and 6 homes. So a variety of housing types, thus the variety of zoning being requested to accommodate that. So there's a few things before you within your packet for consideration. And again, that's seen with the multiple line items. The rezone itself, much as we did with the last one, the big picture, is this the right thing for this property? You get to decide that based on, or at least make recommendation to the council regarding that, on how you feel this fits at this site. Is it consistent with our general plan? Does it work with the area? Based on the flexibility and discretion you have with that, are there direction or things that you're would like to give the applicant, if that is more or less something that you're interested in? There's a development agreement together with this that is something that the commission you could look at and add very specific changes, stipulations, requirements, limit this further, allow more, morph it, change it so you get it to where you're happy before moving that to the council. Of course, you can table it for additional information. You can give that direction to pass along to the council, or you may find that it's not appropriate for this location and you have the option also recommended denial of the request. The action item of the preliminary plat, of course, is all based off of that. So without the approvals of the rezone, the plat would not comply with the existing zoning on the property. So it would either be tabled until you have the rezone in place where you want it, or simply denied if the choice is not to go forward, or at least recommendation of denial that the rezoning is proposed. I believe with that, you've had, again, a handful of comments, and we've been forwarding those to the commission, so I won't lengthen my comments on sharing all those details, but you've heard concerns regarding the housing type, the location of the housing, maybe just some of the design issues, capacity with infrastructure in the area and so forth, that we can also have with our discussion tonight as you're interested. I do know the applicants are on with us this evening, and I'm sure we'd be interested in discussing further their hopes for the property and answer questions from you as well.
Okay, thank you, Lyle. Commissioners, questions for staff on this proposal? Lyle, I do have one. Where we're looking at such a specific zoning tailored to the plat as it's essentially been designed or is shown. If we get to the point where we think that the preliminary plat needs to be or should be modified and moved around, I guess that would also mean then we would be adjusting the zoning boundaries as well, correct?
Yes, that would be accurate. So if that would be my recommendation, would be to align the zoning with the type of housing under it. We, again, had discussed even with the applicant, just putting a blanket zone over over the entire property. But in either case, considerations and adjustments that may be necessary and appropriate. And we would check procedure on that as well as we move forward to how to accommodate that if that's the direction that's given.
Okay. Other questions for Lyle?
Lyle, I know some of the comments that came in through the emails were about the infrastructure and questions about whether adding this many units could impact the sewer system. So I just wondered if you could comment on that, if you think that there is capacity, or if there isn't, are there ways to maybe mitigate that?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Toby. I guess I actually meant to do that as well. I had actually called Lyle during the week after we got that comment from the sewer district manager or people at the sewer district, and just to talk to him a little bit about this as well. And I have some questions about that as well, I'm not calling into question the veracity or the ability of the sewer district to really say what they want to say, but I sometimes wonder, has there been a real analysis done of what the current load of the sewer plant is and what the existing remaining capacity is, or of the lines? The lines may be an issue as well. And but yeah, go ahead, Lyle. I'll let you address that.
Yeah, so the sewer district, what their correspondence is, the commission knows, was passed along to them, is essentially stated that their capacity and their design in this area is set up to accommodate 2 unit per acre development. And so in short, they were saying that they don't believe they have the capacity to serve this development as proposed. We've been aware of that community development staff for several years. The district's pretty well held to that story from development in this neck of the woods. Our general plan in Kaysville City has for decades stated development west of I-15 would be 2 units per acre. I think it's also said in there for equally as long with some additional density along major streets. Of course, that's as general as, that's as specific as it ever got. So what kind of density that is, isn't easy to quantify. So they've essentially planned, according to them, to accommodate the 2 unit per acre type density with their infrastructure. I don't know for certain what all the restraints are that they would have to overcome for this particular item. So I do think it's appropriate to consider as a community, is this something we want within our community? And then also before we are able to move forward with the platting and certainly final plat and go ahead on development, there would be hurdles such as that to overcome and engineer and design around, and whether impact fees or some sort of more creativity is necessary to create the infrastructure necessary. May or may not be viable, but that could be a consideration. I do know in Angel Street towards 200 North, they have concerns with the line with the slopes in the line and how much it can accommodate. So there are some line issues and some capacity issues with that, as well as possible limitations on the processing of the plant itself. So we could find out more. My understanding is much more general than a very specific study that I've ever seen that shows here's exactly what we have left and what we can accommodate. That I can't speak to. If there is one, I've not seen it.
Yeah. It's an issue. It's a question, we've gotten such kind of almost just a definitive or a blanket statement from the sewer district with regard to this, but I really question whether, we really have the data to back that up at this point.
I guess the comment I make about that is that it seems like when we've had a prior, let's say like maybe R2 development on east of I-15, it's not brought up. I was at the discussion for back in December when the city council approved the current general plan, and their thoughts, at least a couple of the council members at that time said the build out is 40,000 people. That's what they look as the cap of the population in Kaysville. Really, what you have to decide is where those people are going to live. And so I don't really look at this as being a problem that you have R2 on west of I-15. It's just, where is the right place to do it? And you have to be smart about where you do it. It doesn't mean that you're going to put R2 at every single vacant land in west of I-15. You do it where it makes sense, with the mind in mind that the cap is like 40,000 and the infrastructure should be in place to meet that 40,000, wherever it's going to be built out.
Good point. Thanks, Toby. Other questions or comments from the commissioners?
I have a question. If I'm looking at the proposed layout, and I'm looking by lot 109, 308, 303, 302, it looks like the Carolyn Anderson parcel is not a part of this proposal number one, which means that's why I'm guessing there's a half cul-de-sac there right at lot 109. And so I'm just wondering if the city, what the city's discussions with the applicant is and intent for that road, if that, you know, extension was a part of this, and let's say Carolyn Anderson didn't sell for a number of years, then that would act as the end of a cul-de-sac. Is that correct as I'm looking at it?
So, and the applicant can maybe explain this somewhat better, but based on their initial thinking, current thinking with how this property might develop, they wouldn't necessarily do it all at once. So over time, they would phase it. And this one is in number 3 because they would build this out first, probably with those lot 109. And right now, 75 South Street, there's some development occurring with Ovation Homes just west of this that will actually give that second outlet into 200 North. But for many years has been a cul-de-sac well beyond our typical standard of 600 feet. And the city allows for that as long as we stub into the property with the assumption that eventually we're going to get that through street connection. But the applicant's simply thinking that whether it's this exact configuration of accommodating in some form or another emergency turnaround and access until that development eventually occurs, either on their what's shown as phase 3 here or the Anderson piece. And so from a preliminary concept, yeah, it's a standard fire truck turnaround radius that would work fine for us. We'd have to get into the details if this is the specific arrangement and make sure every component that does work for us. Ultimately, we'd love to see those go away. We've got a few in around the city with these half bubbles once the streets do continue. That I wouldn't, maybe not a problem, but just not necessary at that point to keep. So.
Okay, other questions? All right, if there's no other questions, then let's go to the applicants and hear from them.
Okay, so we see a hand raised. Looks like John Harvey. We're showing your hand. We're giving you permission to speak now. Once you got yourself unmuted, you're welcome to address the commission. I would assume you're helping represent the owners.
Yeah, hi, my name is John Harvey. I'm the son of Nephi Harvey, and I'm actually here with Nate Alvey too. He's working with us on this. So I'll kind of turn it to him and he can kind of give a couple more details if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Good evening again, everybody. I look forward to the continual dialogue that you have. I think you've already had some great talking points that you've addressed. I'll try to just focus on a couple of the bullet points here from the Harvey standpoint. First off, this is a day and evening with mixed emotions on their behalf. This has been a family property for a significant period of time, 50 plus years. Land that they currently farm and desire to continue to farm. One of the big bullet points I would emphasize here is that this is a multi-phased proposal. The Harveys have spent about 6 months putting this preliminary plat together that you see. And their vision, I can tell you, is about 100% set in stone with phase 1 and phase 3 that has the private road cul-de-sac. The other 2 phases, they've been advised to leave their options open, that they don't have any immediate desire to want to develop this as proposed, but as a placeholder, and we're something that we feel would be appropriate for the neighborhood. The Harveys have been approached by developers to develop the entire 14-acre parcel into a higher density community. This is about 14 acres as referenced, and the high density portion only covers about 4.2 acres. This is an area, again, if we go back to phase 1, again, that is an area that they have 100% set in stone desire of what they would like to develop in the near future, with approval from the city. There's 9 lots proposed there. 6 of those lots are already spoken for and will be built on by members of the Harvey household. So everything that you see and discuss here, understand that this is some family-owned property that they want to see developed properly in an area that is appropriate for their family, multi-generation family that will be living in this area, and continue to desire to maintain a high desirable area to live.
Okay.
I think that'll do for now.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Alvey. Commissioners, questions of Mr. Alvey?
Chair, do you want to take these in order of operation, or do you just want whole comments, zoning, and layout together?
I think we need to do them together because the zoning boundaries seem to be tied very much to the layout of the proposed development. So really, I think it's appropriate to talk about them together.
So this is a design question, and I guess, I don't think we need to design by committee, but just something in thinking about circulation in this area. This is essentially 2 separate subdivisions that are accessed off of 2 completely separate thoroughfares. So you have right now phase 1 that would be 200 north connecting to Morning Mist Lane, which provides you a decent north-south connection, but really you're traversing through existing subdivisions south down Morning Mist Lane that ultimately comes out south of the Angel Street Soccer Complex. And then you have this other subdivision piece that would be bound by future development by the Anderson property that comes up off of 75 South Street. And just, I know there are various opinions on this, but from a planning standpoint, street connectivity ultimately does drive down the total amount of congestion on any one street. It has an averaging effect. It provides for mobility of folks to get from point A to point B by walking or bicycling much easier. I'm thinking that from the cul-de-sac bulb off of 75 South Street, you'd nearly be able to throw a rock to 200 north, or you could see it, but you would still be 2 miles out and around by a pedestrian or a cyclist to get over to the grocery store, versus connecting 75 into Morning Mist Lane. So just a plug or a push for street connectivity in this area, I think would be really beneficial. And then just the other piece about the zoning is that this is one of those that, as far as I see the general plan, as far as I see the major roadways, the connection to in between one existing freeway and a future one to the west here, if we don't provide additional intensity, if we don't provide for the opportunity for a mix of housing here, then my question would be where? Like I think this is a really viable area for the R2 zoning. I'm a little concerned about the configuration that seems to limit to some degree some of the street connectivity that we could see with just some minor tweaks to this to provide that teed in connection from 75 to Morning Mist Lane.
Good point. Street connectivity is an important issue. I appreciate those comments, Scott. Commissioners, other comments, questions?
I would support, I agree with Commissioner Hess that, as we look at opportunities to do R2 on west of I-15, this checks all the boxes. I mean, as far as the general plan goes, as far as like being on an arterial street on 200 North that is going to be close to where the connects in with the West Davis corridor. I think this is a great opportunity to provide some of the diversity in housing on the west side.
Okay. Any other comments, commissioners? Or questions, I guess, really of the applicant is where we're at.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is a good discussion, but I think we should have some of this discussion after the public hearing.
After the public hearing, right, I agree.
Yeah, agreed.
I agree. So any other questions of the applicant, commissioners? And if not, we'll move on to the public hearing part of this. Okay, let's go to the public hearing. All right, this is a public hearing for the requested rezones and for preliminary plat for the development as indicated. And so we will take comments for both. And really the development, as has been noted here, is the zoning is tied very much to the proposed development outlay or layout. And wherever we wind up with the higher density, that would be the higher density zoning and vice versa. So we'll take full comments on both of those together. And again, we would just like to remind folks to be succinct, be brief, let us know what your concerns and your issues are. But recognize there are others who also want to speak, and we do have an agenda with other items that we do need to be getting to. So we appreciate your comments, but we also appreciate your making them brief and succinct as you can. So with that, Lyle, let's go ahead and see who we have here to comment.
And we do still have about 10 people here with us in attendance. If any of you are interested, as invited by the chair just now, please raise your hand through the Zoom function there on the bottom middle of your screen. And we will take you one at a time as we call your name, give you the ability to speak. And so go ahead and take just a moment now. We'll watch for any hand raises.
I should note, while we're waiting for that, I should note that we have received a number of emails on this one as well, with a lot of comments and issues raised. Those emails will all become part of the public record here for the public hearing. And they have helped, I think, to inform us on some of the issues to be considered.
Yeah, so far, Mr. Chair, I don't see any hand raises from those in attendance. So I'll just do one more reminder. We've got our first one up. Ryan Regis, we're going to give you permission to speak now. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and address the commission.
Hi, yes, thank you. Appreciate this venue to discuss the rezoning and the plat as shown. My question and concern is, how well does this multifamily housing fit with the neighborhood of the Symphony Preserve neighborhood? I'm not against multifamily housing. I think that's necessary, but the connection immediately through Morning Mist Lane, you have these very large single family homes, 80 of them in that neighborhood, and then to connect immediately to 55 townhomes there, that would be my concern in terms of valuation of property, fit for the neighborhood, traffic through to 200 North. All of those things are concerning to me. So I don't know if there's a way to reconfigure that to where it seems like that that kind of subdivision is its own little layout. Maybe to have that as a separate little community, access to 200 North down through 75 South, maybe makes more sense. But those are just my concerns. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Regis. Appreciate that. Lyle, anyone else?
Yeah, currently I see no other hands. So just a reminder, if anybody's interested, we'll give you just a moment. Okay, yeah, it looks like Mr. Gary Kauser. Hopefully we said that appropriately. If you'll go ahead and unmute yourself, and you're welcome to address the commission.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'd just like to second what Mr. Regis said. I'm not opposed. My address is my backyard will back up against these proposed 2-level townhomes.
Yes, and if you could give us your address, that would be
167 North Mountain Vistas Road. Again, I'm not opposed to obviously developing, but I would disagree with that this is an R2 zone. I think it's prime property surrounded by high-end single-family units. I think there are probably other places that you could find R2 property. If not, if he's looking for multifamily dwelling, then possibly reducing the amount of units and making them make sure that they're a higher end rather than I just worry about what it's going to look like, 5-10 years. So, I know they're reviewing the general plan, and maybe it's a good idea to possibly hold off on this and see what the general plan brings. But I would say that it's not an R2 zone.
okay. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Lyle, any others?
Okay, currently no, so maybe a last call to encourage anyone to raise their hand that hasn't done so already to comment on this item. And I see no other hands raised, Mr. Chair, at this time.
All right. If there are no other comments, then we will end the public hearing and bring the discussion back. First, we'll turn back to the applicant, Mr. Harvey and Mr. Alvey, if you have any further comments to make and any responses to any of the comments that we've heard.
Oh, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Just to clarify, I might understand that Commissioner Hess is wanting to see 75 South connect to Morning Mist. Was that a recommendation or a concern? Or I'd like to address that specifically. I just want to make sure I understood.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. It's really just it's a general comment on street connectivity in the area that, that greater intersection density will actually drive down congestion because it averages that, it's additional routes for more cars to take. So fewer cars take one single route. So instead of having Morning Mist be operating as really a collector road down this, it has an opportunity to kind of level out the traffic depending on where people are coming from. Because I just see this as, it's kind of two subdivisions. It's a north subdivision for Morning Mist Lane, and then kind of a subdivision to the west on 75 South Street that are really separated and could be for a very long time, depending on what happens to the Anderson property, with really no connectivity between the two. So whether it's a recommendation, but it's certainly just a general comment on, a push for street connectivity on the west side of Kaysville. I think that the east side and the old grid networks and the way that we used to develop actually assists a lot with reduction of overall traffic congestion.
Very good, thank you. To address that specifically, this would be a very sensitive issue, not only for the Harveys, but also for all of their neighbors on 75 South. The Harveys have spent a significant amount of time discussing with neighbors what they would like to see in this area, and they like the quiet feel. They feel that the connectivity through the Ovation homes is above and beyond more than sufficient for access to 200 North, to Angel Street. So we would hope that your concerns are alone. We would hope that the rest of the commission doesn't have those same concerns, because again, if I were to just hammer home phase one, which is that southwest corner, they've spent about 6 months hammering out the details of that phase, and they're pretty set on wanting to and hopeful to be able to move forward with phase one as drawn.
I'll add something in there. I agree actually with Scott, but I'll just give more background. The Preserve Symphony Homes Preserve subdivision. There's I think 3 or 4 cul-de-sacs. I had fought, if you want to call it that. I had made some comments and tried to persuade everyone that more connectivity is better, is exactly what Commissioner Hess is saying. And I got shot down on that. So there's now the 3 or 4 cul-de-sacs without as much connectivity. And I understand the concerns of the residents on 75 South. I do. I get where they're coming from. But to illustrate exactly what Scott's point is, if we keep it the way it is, that makes 75 South much less traveled and probably only traveled by the residents there. But what it does is it puts all of the shortcut traffic who want to go to Angel Street onto Morning Mist Lane. And it's a trade-off. If we keep 75 South as proposed, then Morning Mist Lane gets more of the traffic. If we cut it through, then it's, as Scott said, more of a balance between 75 South and Morning Mist Lane. Hopefully there's not cut through traffic. I think most people will probably go down to Angel Street on 200 North, but there will be cut through traffic. And if we recognize there's going to be cut through traffic, more connectivity is better, and it lessens the burden on everybody as opposed to putting more on some and less on others. So unfortunately, I guess for the applicant, I understand their position, but I would throw my voice in favor of what Scott was saying.
Mr. Albee, can we have you just, if you want to address that, please feel free, and then make any other comments that you want. And then I think we're going to turn it to the commission here and see where we go with this.
Okay,
Okay.
yes. Mr. Harvey, I think you should have the ability to speak as long as you're ready to go right ahead.
Yeah, okay, so this is John. I'll answer this one. So we have spent a lot of time looking at various concepts. Lyle, could you move back to the zoning map? I think it had a little bit more of a zoomed out view. Because we were looking at the cut through traffic, and currently right now, people don't like going to that 200 North and Angel Street intersection through the stoplight. And so looking at it, if we were to connect 75 South to 200 North, it would be pretty much a straight shot, cutting that triangle. And so it wouldn't just be cut through traffic, but it would be quite a lot of cut through traffic to avoid a light and cut that distance down. And we've seen this a lot already on that corner lot that's listed as RA. There's a house, and it's a relative of ours, and they actually have people cutting through their private property right now just to avoid that light. And so connecting 75 South directly to 200 North without any stoplights or turns or stop signs, we're worried would magnify that problem by quite a bit. And once it connects to Anderson's, it will have 2 outlets, one through 1700 West, which will go in soon, and eventually when the Andersons connect to. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Appreciate that. Okay, any other comments from Mr. Harvey or Mr. Albee?
I think we're good on our end.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, let's turn it now to us and discuss the proposal and what we've heard. Where are we at on this?
Can I ask, sorry, one question of the applicant?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Josh.
What conversations, if any, has there been with Carolyn Anderson's family as to that property?
So if I understand, Carolyn actually passed away last year.
Yeah.
And so now it's been passed down to her children, but they have no desire to sell currently. In fact, they are currently building a barn on the property as we speak. So they're in no rush to. We have spoken to them about this development, kind of our plans, but right now they're not looking to sell, as far as I know. But I can't speak for them, obviously.
And there's a little side note. This is Nathan Alvey. As I've spoken with the Harveys, again, they desire to continue to farm the land. And if you were to force them to connect to Morning Mist right now, you would take a significant chunk out of their current farmland and ability to drain the water.
Okay.
Just to, I guess, clarify my comment is that I wouldn't necessarily require the connection today, but what I would do is reconfigure lots 402, 403, 404 to allow for a stub west to 75. I guess it's not about connecting today. It's about this limiting the ability to ever connect. Just as a clarification, but I understand the concerns and see the other two benefits of having those Angel Street to 200 North connections from both 75 as well as the one just slightly west of that. So it can be mitigated, but it really does impact connectivity in the area.
And, I'm familiar with the Anderson family, and if I know them like I think I do, particularly Kyle, but others, I'm not sure they're going to be selling anytime soon, meaning in the next decade or two or more. And that being the case, if we don't make that connection from 75 through lot 104 and 403 and 404, like Scott was saying, then we're left with this, dead end, in effect, for who knows how many years, when West Davis Corridor comes in, and this becomes a completely different looking place than it is right now, and we have this dead end that we don't like to see when we're talking about planning. And good planning and good connectivity, good circulation, good layout of the city. That's not an ideal situation. And so I kind of agree with what Scott said. We don't need to design this on the fly, but we identify the issue and wonder if we can find a compromise between our comments and what would work for the applicant.
Yeah, good point. Okay, other comments, commissioners? I have one, just part of we've had some of the discussion from the emails, and I had actually thought about this myself as we look at where the R2 zoning and the property is there. And we've had some comments from the existing homeowners that abut that part of it. And their request has been essentially, would we consider doing similar to what we've done with some other developments, namely up by Boondocks and some of the others, where the higher density part of the development is not directly adjacent to existing homes, which would, now in order to do that here, that would probably mean a pretty substantial redesign of this subdivision in order to do that. But I get the point that they're making, and I don't know whether it's worth considering that or not. Commissioners, I'm kind of curious to hear what you all think about
I guess I'll chime in. I agree with that actually. And as a side note, I'm guessing I'm not alone in this, that the commissioners would probably agree with me. I am surprised and maybe even shocked that we haven't had near the amount of citizen input that I would have expected for this.
Agreed.
I mean, we had 5 or 10 times the amount of input on the Webb Lane 1 lot subdivision a week or 2 or 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, whatever it was. And so I'm a little surprised at that, but we can still grapple with the question. I think we can still do that, of course, without a lot of citizen input. We've heard it enough from other projects. Absolutely. That we can ask ourselves, number one, is this amount of density what we want here? And number two, is this layout what we want? I'll reserve my comments, I guess, for my first question, but the second one is I do think the layout, if we're generally okay with it, subject maybe to some modifications, whatever, the layout can change, or maybe should change to better, buffer the multifamily from the existing properties that are there.
Commissioners' thoughts?
Josh, I'd agree with that. I think you should, like we did over on the one by Boondocks, I think there should be, kind of a buffer zone between the existing moving out and putting the townhomes more closer to the road than around that. I think it would, but are we designing on the fly on this, or are we just, making a recommendation?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Given how the rezone and the layout, the preliminary plat essentially are so closely tied together. I mean, I guess, we're looking at making some pretty substantial, if we want to make recommendations on things to change, now's the time to do it.
This is Jared Doxey. I agree with the interconnectivity issue.
Yeah, so do I.
I lived for 12 years over in Barnes Park with Second North on the north and Flint Street on the west. And there was 2 streets that people could cut through, so they didn't have to go to the intersection of Flint and Second North. And in 12 years, it was not an issue in our neighborhood for people that cut through. And we know people did, but it was a non-issue. But I do like the idea of connectivity and tying in with what's existing. And I note the new elementary school down on the far end of Second North. That's where the kids will go to school, so they won't be driving to school through the subdivision. They'll be going out on Second North and heading down to the new elementary school. I'm pretty sure that's new school is where these kids would go. So I like the density. I like, it fits the overall plan of the city. I think we need to strongly suggest maybe reconfiguring the site development a little bit, because I do agree, Chairman, that I think it's important to separate the existing lots with the townhomes. I think that's just smart planning. And so that's my feedback. I agree with the comments that have been made.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I was just say, I generally agree with that. I think that the separation is good. It is an interesting one just because the western property line, there's really only one home that's adjacent and affected, and that's the Russell home. And then I think it's actually the gentleman who had made the comment. It looks like there's a lot 3 and a lot 3A. And as I was looking at the aerial image, there's kind of an additional lot behind those homes on Mountain Vistas Road that provides some current buffer separation. And I don't know if that's a future building lot or what that lot 3A is, but there's sort of, in some ways, a built-in separation, at least for those folks to the east. The folks on the south, I could see an argument for reconfiguring, lots 401 through 406 to provide more of a step down from large lot single family down into maybe smaller lot single family to the townhomes as they approach 200 North. We can see the reason for this pattern is that you can develop the first part, you get a holistic development of townhomes to sell which likely and smartly, funds the rest of the development. So I can understand the position and the way they want to do the takedown of the property, but it's hard to reconfigure on the fly other than make some recommendations like have Morning Mist Lane, surrounded by single family and reconfigure some of those townhomes. But I can't design it on the fly in a way that would make it easy for them to think, I guess, interpret our thoughts. So
yeah, no, I agree. And I think what we would be doing is we would be saying, we would be inclined to recommend the rezones and the preliminary plat if these kinds of things were done. And then, then have the applicant go back. And now when I say have the applicant go back and do some work to redesign, I mean, I guess what we would essentially be doing is we would be saying we would be recommending against the rezone as proposed. And we would be more inclined to approve it if these certain things were done. And then the applicant has the ability to take his existing application and go to the council and ask for their consideration, because they are the ultimate approving authority, with us essentially providing a negative recommendation for the way it's currently proposed. Or they could take it back and do some redesign work and come back to us and see if they could get a positive recommendation from us with some of the redesigns based on the things we talk about.
This is Commissioner Nguyen. So if they do that with our negative recommendation and the city council also rejects it, then what's their next steps, or what are their options?
Well, if the council rejects it, that's the end of it as far as the proposal as it exists, and they would have to consider doing something different.
Right. Okay. So obviously, what about tabling this? Is that a choice or?
Sure. Yeah, we could do that. But tabling, I think I would be willing to table if the applicant agrees to kind of take a look at what we're asking them to do.
Yeah.
If the applicant doesn't want to do that, then I think we're in the position of making a negative recommendation, and then the applicant has the choice of going on to the city council and seeing what they say.
I mean, when I look at this project, I like it in principle. Again, just as the other commissioners have said, it does fit. And then I look at Mr. Spenlove's email, and Lau, maybe you can bring up the attachment that he sent in. But I really like what he said, and he was in support of this. Having said that, he had some concerns, but the one comment that I really like is if we're not going to do this along 200 North, then where? So, I mean, in principle, I'm in support of this project with some modifications as we have discussed.
Yeah. Yeah, just my comments. I mean, I don't have a problem with the higher density and with the variety of housing. I always think that's a positive, particularly in Kaysville, where we do seem to have a lot of housing that is really kind of pretty uniform. And to give some more options, perhaps even some affordability options, but higher density doesn't necessarily mean affordability. We've seen that in the past. But some variety of housing styles, some variety of living styles, I think is a good thing, particularly when you think about in Kaysville, and I'm going to sound like a broken record on this because I keep harping on this, but I say we don't have a lot of land left to develop. We've got a couple of 100 acres left, and that's about it in the city. And so to get some more variety on that I think is a good thing. It's along 200 North. I think that's a great thing. I think we do need to get some more clarification from the sewer district because they've pretty much kind of stomped on this and said, we can't handle this density. And I'm not so convinced that that's really the case.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I want to find out a little bit more, but I'm inclined to approve the kind of development that's being proposed here, but I would redesign it a little bit. I think I would move some of that higher density housing away from the existing housing that exists to the east and to the south, and maybe concentrate it a little bit more towards 200 North and away from some of those existing residential properties. I really do like Scott's suggestion, and the others of you have agreed that 75 South really ought to be connected through to Morning Mist. I think connectivity is a good thing. Giving people more options of different ways to go helps. We see that in communities just in general. Yeah, those are kind of my thoughts.
I definitely agree with you. And then looking at the letter, there's a sentence where it says, if we choose to go forward with it, then basically it's a process of figuring out how to support it.
Yeah. Well, where are we at, gentlemen? Well, are we ready to make any kind of motion on this? I mean, are we to that point, or do we need to talk about this a little more?
Well, I guess I would also maybe ask the developers, if they're willing to consider some of the points that you've brought up, Chair.
Right. Okay. Let's do that. Let's, Mr. Harvey, Mr. Alvey, what are your thoughts of what you're hearing us discuss here?
Yeah, John Harvey, I'm showing a hand up. You should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead and speak.
Okay, yeah, we're here.
Thank you, gentlemen. A lot of just thoughts that we've had, a lot of frustration about the connectivity. First thought, there was a note about the lack of community comments. They were anticipating a lot more feedback from the community on this. I think that's a testament to the legwork that the Harvey family has done prior to this evening's meeting, talking with the neighbors, discussing what the neighbors would like to see. If you were to require the connectivity, I think you would have every member of 75 South showing up to the next meeting opposing the connectivity. We spent a significant amount of time with the city staff, with Lyle, making sure that this little cul-de-sac met the requirements. And we'd love to hear some support and feedback from Lyle, from the fire department, referencing that this little cul-de-sac meets everything in the current ordinances. We're not asking for any special exceptions on our cul-de-sac. As far as changes and redesigning for the high density, I would say absolutely. We're open to exploring a redesign of that portion. It is a placeholder right now. Primary focus would be to not have to tweak and make any changes to the 9 lots in the southwest corner, lots 101 through 109. They've already been assigned to different family members, and when you're talking about stubbing out a lot, or excuse me, stubbing out a road through lot 104, you're removing a lot that's already been specified for a family member. John, do you have any thoughts you want to add there?
Yeah, and again, like Nate was saying, those are the lots we're focusing on right now. The high density is completely up in the air. We are open to changes on that. We're open for layout. The biggest reason we don't have it more clustered towards 200 North is because we're doing this in a phased approach, because we have our fruit orchards and we're not planning to get rid of those anytime soon. I mean, we've got 4 generations tied into this, and the gardens, the orchards, those are going to be the very last thing to go. So the reason we put the high density kind of over, and again, we don't even know what that high density will look like, but we put it there so it won't impact the garden and the orchards. And that's also why you see that private street there. But for right now, we're really just looking at getting those 9 lots primarily for family members, and we're doing a self-development and financing that through ourselves.
Okay, I appreciate those comments. From my standpoint, I appreciate your flexibility and your willingness on the higher density portion of that. I think that's great, and I think there needs to be a little bit of work done there. With regard to the lots 101 through 109 and the way you've designed that, I appreciate where you're saying that you as a family have worked hard on this, and this is what you've all come up with, and it serves the purposes of your family well. We are charged with looking at what serves the entire community well. And that's part of the discussion I think that we've been having here, and some of the discussion that I've heard here tonight from the commissioners is that we think the community would be better served with the connectivity. Now, whether the commission decides to move forward with that and recommend that, that's another thing. And then, of course, it'll ultimately depend on whether the council agrees with that and what they decide. But that's kind of our charge, and that's, I think, where we're coming from, and why that may differ with what you all have been thinking and doing. Commissioners, other comments?
I'll just echo that and maybe add some things. So I'll first say I definitely appreciate that that it seems perhaps that the lack of citizen input is because of the work that the applicant has done, and I personally like to see that. I think that should be done on every proposal like this. So that is a good thing, definitely.
Yes, kudos to the applicants for doing that.
Yeah. My comment, I guess, on the connectivity thing, and this is what I would say based on what the applicant has just said. It's that, I think reasonable minds can differ on the connectivity issue. And so I guess I'll make these comments more for the ears of the council than anything. And then the applicant will be able to sort of make their case, if you will. I understand if we suggested or required, if you will, that 75 South connect to Morning Mist Lane, that everyone from 75 South is going to come out, and that is their prerogative, and I think they probably should do that if they're concerned. But like Wilf said, our concern is not just 75, the residents on 75 South. We certainly are interested, or should be, at least the council should be interested in what they have to say. But right now, Morning Mist Lane does not connect through, and perhaps the residents on the south end of Morning Mist Lane have no idea that really this may be coming their way, and so they're not as interested or as vested in this proposal as those on 75 South are. And so if the applicant had told me they had talked to everyone on Morning Mist Lane, on the south end of Morning Mist Lane, and they had also got their buy-in, that might persuade me, but I suspect they haven't. And so we have to, like Will said, look at what is best for the whole vicinity, the whole area, the community as a whole. And I think that at least looking at or exploring the notion of connectivity is worthwhile. It's worth doing. And then I have some other comments I'll save for later, but the last little anecdote I'll add in is if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy if the people on 75 South came out, up in arms and in droves to fight against this connectivity thing, because I live on 300 West between 200 North and Gailey Park, and that is a place that's a shortcut. The difference between that street, 300 West, and this is 300 West has no curb and gutter. It's a very narrow asphalt road. If you actually drive on there, if you want to go walk, you can't walk on the one sidewalk that's on the one side of the street because it's so uneven. You have to walk in the middle of the road. It's not an ideal scenario, and it ain't changing anytime soon. And this, on the other hand, 75 South has sidewalk on both sides of the street. I think it's a wider right of way. It's a wider asphalt. So if worst case scenario, 75 South became the thoroughfare that they all think it's going to be, which I think is an unreasonable concern, or not an unreasonable one, but it's not likely to happen like they think it will. The street is built to handle it. The sidewalks are there on both sides. It has some mitigating measures to deal with whatever connectivity might come. So what I'm saying is recommending that connectivity onto Morning Mist Lane puts the burden evenly spread, as opposed to having it all on Morning Mist, and there's residents on Morning Mist that don't even live there because the lots aren't even developed, and so they can't even come here to speak, and we have to take that into account for them.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments, commissioners?
Yeah, I agree with what the vice chair just said. And I guess I'm looking at the map right now and I'm just thinking out loud, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but if we did ask for connectivity to Morning Mist Lane, again, as we have said, we are always looking out for the community in general. And as the vice chair pointed out, those future residents don't have a say because the homes aren't built yet. But if we do ask for that connectivity, we're actually relieving some pressure traffic wise for those residents in the future, or else they would have to go all the way around to get hit 200 North. Is that a good inference, or anybody see that or not?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I'm in support of asking for that connectivity. Again, I love the product, but yep, you're right. I mean, we do have, that's one of the things that we are looking at always, is not just, again, looking out for the community and also the future residents.
So where are we at, commissioners? Are we, with the potential redesign of the higher density part of it, I don't know that I would be ready to recommend the rezone for the R2 yet. But I think I'm inclined to approve it with some redesign of that. But I want to see the redesign. And again, the layout of this is so tied to the zoning boundaries as well. I think we really need that in order to do that. If you redesign the higher density, it probably will affect a couple of the others. I think what I'm hearing the applicants say is that what they really want right now is the lots 101 through 109, which would be, what would that be? Would that be the R110 or the R114 zoning? I need to look.
R114.
It's the R114, okay. So, if that's the one that is really critical, the others I think may be affected by the redesign of the R2. Are we willing to give some kind of a recommendation at least on the R114 part of the rezone at this point? And then to consider the design for that on a preliminary plat. And then for the rest of it, at this point, we're not giving a recommendation yet, or we're not ready to recommend approval.
I don't know if this directly answers your question. So maybe if someone wants to talk directly to what Will's saying, go ahead. But I just have some broader comments and then maybe specific on what you just said there, Will.
Uh-huh. Well, nobody's saying, so go ahead, Josh.
Okay. So I guess maybe we haven't discussed completely, or maybe I'll just throw in my 2 cents on the broader zoning question. I don't want the applicant to think by any means that I disagree with this proposal as a whole or anything like that. In fact, again, I was surprised we didn't have some opposition, if only on the townhomes, because if you just go across the street, not that long ago, with the Green subdivision there that went R2, we had a lot fewer units proposed in that rezone right next to Smith's. And I actually think that property is more conducive and better suited for more units because it's right next to the Smith's than this property is. Nevertheless, here we are. So I am in favor of a variety of uses here. I am in favor of a little higher density than really we've seen. This would be the most dense, at least the townhomes portion, anywhere else in west of I-15. So I'm okay with it in principle, and I think it has to come out here somewhere, and I'm actually okay with this right now. I will say, I'm okay with it right now because my initial gut reaction here was, as I said, our last meeting or the meeting before that, about the proposed subdivision, the rezone that was on the south end of Angel and the south end of Sunset down there, right at the south end of Sunset Equestrian Estates. I think one of my comments on that was, let's wait for the general plan to come through. Because I think that is a little less settled area of the city than this is. And so I don't know that waiting, the more I thought about it, I think I'm close to either side here, but the more I think about it, I don't know that waiting for the general plan is necessary on this property. I think we have an idea. If we want a little higher density on major streets, here we are in West Kaysville. We don't have to wait for a broader plan, in my opinion, on this property as we did on the other ones in our previous meeting. And it's not entirely without precedent that we have sort of a mix of layouts in Kaysville, but on west of I-15, this would be somewhat unprecedented. I mean, other areas of Kaysville has something similar. So in principle, I think it conforms to our current general plan and what I would suspect our next iteration of a general plan would suggest. I just think that reconfiguring things would be better. Taking a different shot at the connectivity, the realigning or repositioning the multifamily. That would be my suggested recommendation if we make that to the council, and not deny it outright, just refine it and get it right.
Yeah, that would be my preference as well. I think, on the higher density as well, I think there's another question that needs to be answered before we really go ahead and approve that rezoning and the plat. And that would be the issue that was raised by the sewer district. We need to get an answer there because we need to know. We need to know what the situation is with regard to the sewer district. To me, maybe the line capacity, and that's an issue. I don't know. That's something I think I need a little bit more information about.
So could we somehow move it, quote unquote, forward, and at the same time stipulate that at the end of the day, we want some kind of, whatever you want to call it, direction or more studies from the water department, or
certainly from the sewer.
Sewer, I'm sorry, yes.
Information, but I think that really only relates to the R2 part of it, because I think for the rest of it, the densities fall pretty closely in line with what I think the sewer district is okay with. It's really the R2 part of it, and then I think we also really want to see that R2 area a little bit redesigned. Whether we would be inclined to go ahead and approve or recommend approval of the other rezones, but hold off on the R2 until we get some of these other questions answered. But I suspect that approving the rezone for not so much maybe the R114, but for the R110 and the R16, those may get redesigned as well, because you may have to reconfigure the R2 part of it.
Mr. Chair, this is staff, just maybe a couple comments as hopefully helping inform the conversation that's being held. So I think we're referring to these lots here on the southwest as an R114.
Yeah.
They're in fact proposed in the R110 district. So just a point of clarification there.
That is the R110?
Correct. The R114 is up against 200 North.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought initially, but okay.
So that's just one comment. So just to clarify what's being spoken of. And then the other portion is to perhaps respond and to the applicant's comment. As designed, it does meet city standards. So they were asking about that with the cul-de-sac and the stub, and the type of connectivity. However, as a commission and council, ultimately, you also have discretion when considering development agreement, rezone, and the plat. If you want to do the connectivity you're discussing, I guess is what I'm going at. It is an option of the council to consider, but this is something that has been looked at by fire and staff, and at least meets those minimums that could function as what our code states.
Well, yeah, when you say it was looked at by like fire and the staff, I mean, what you were looking at was whether the cul-de-sac met the design standards of the city, right?
Correct. Cul-de-sac length, stubbing ability, and the turnaround.
Yeah.
Would be acceptable to the fire. All those things are items that we looked at.
Yeah, and I don't think there's not an issue with that. I think the problem or the issue is whether that street ought to be connected on through, and which is a completely different issue. So
So what's our sticking point right now? Can we summarize it? Starting to
Yeah.
get confused there.
Well, that's what I'm kind of trying to think about. I mean, it's, if I'm right, I think what the applicant is really looking for immediately are the lots 101 through 109. That's the most pressing thing that they've been working on. And then the others are kind of like future phases, things that they would look at in the future.
So let's look at 101 and through 109. What's the sticking point there?
The sticking point is the connectivity.
Okay.
Whether 75 South ought to be connected on through to Morning Mist.
You know, when I look at the connectivity, I'm okay with it as it's drawn up. Again, like I said, Morning Mist Lane, I'm definitely, that's going to be my sticking point. But you know, with 75, I'm good with as is.
Well, so Quan, when you say Morning Mist is your sticking point, what do you mean? What are you saying?
What I'm saying is I do want that connectivity there. Again, you know, what we're talking about right now, you mentioned that right now we're looking at 109 through 101 through 109.
Yeah.
And the sticking point there is the connectivity. I'm good with it as it is. But when it comes over here to Morning Mist Lane, then that's where I'm going to ask definitely for the connection, for the connectivity.
Connection to where?
Sorry, let me just bring up my map here. So as the plan stands right now, is it connected to Morning Mist Lane, the development?
That's the proposed road, yeah, to take Morning Mist Lane all the way out to 200 North, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, then I'm good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was confused.
So you're saying you're okay with the design pretty much as it is?
I am.
Okay.
And you know, so again, I mean, I look at the totality of the circumstance. I mean, one, we're always looking for the community and looking just in general. And then the other part too is I look at, you know, what our role is. And, you know, I don't want it to be a sticking point for somebody to develop, to bring in more revenue, to bring in more jobs, et cetera. So I'm looking at the totality of it, and I'm okay with as it is. I'm not stuck on the connectivity to 75.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion.
Right. Okay. Maybe to take this in bite-sized chunks, commissioners, as we say, let's look at that first phase with the request for the R110 zoning, with the outline of that first phase as it is, given the road pattern the way it is. What's our recommendation on that? Are we willing to recommend A, the rezoning on that, and then B, the plat layout as it is, or do we want to require or at least recommend the 75 South be connected through so that they would stub that out into the future phases?
Yeah, you guys know my opinion already.
Yes.
My opinion is we recommend, or I would recommend, you know, approval kind of as of the general concept, and by that I mean a variety of zones, a spectrum of densities, and you know, connections to 200 North as it's shown, with the caveat that it get reconfigured to accomplish two purposes. Number one, reorient the highest density, the R2, so that maybe it is more oriented towards 200 North and not so much tucked up against the larger lots that exist. And then so reorient that, and then number two, reorient the circulation so the 75 South connects to Morning Mist. So it's a general approval of the idea with a suggestion or a recommendation that things get revised. And, you know, I'm mindful of the applicant's efforts and their desires to do the R110 portions. I think, you know, I'm not saying that needs to be put the brakes on entirely. I just think it can be reconfigured to accomplish their desires and their goals, even possibly the number of lots that they want there, while also accomplishing or addressing and compromising with the concerns that I've said or that Scott has said and others. That's where I'm at.
Okay, so you're looking at the overall and saying that that you would recommend that we are generally in favor with the mix of zoning, the mix of densities, the mix of types of development, with just kind of the caveat that the higher density part be looked at being redesigned to move it away, provide some more buffering to those existing single family homes, and to provide the connection of 75 South through to Morning Mist.
Yeah, and then, yes, that's exactly right. And then let me just tack on one little piece as to why I say reorient the R2 or the townhomes. I think they're better suited, maybe the bulk along 200 North, number one, and then number two. I mean, if you look at the Russell parcel and then lot 3A, there's 10 units right there along, compared to 2 units or 2 lots. You know, that's not the best buffer. And I think it can be redesigned to accomplish both maybe some single family along lot 3A, lot 4 existing in Mountain Vista and Keith Russell lot, while also still getting the same number of you know, townhomes or whatever, just somewhere else on this parcel.
So given what you're talking about, Josh, that doesn't seem like something that we can or should be moving on as a recommendation to the council, because it's still pretty indeterminate. It's not very definite as to where the zone boundaries are and what the preliminary plat is and so on. So are we looking at, would that be something more like saying a tabling with this direction to the applicant to provide these kinds of changes that we're asking for?
Yeah, it probably, I suppose it would be a tabling, because even if we said, you know, we're in favor of the zoning, we can't really do that because the zoning is so tied to the site plan.
Right, it is.
Or the layout that we can't really do that. So yeah, I guess I would be proposing a tabling, much to my dismay.
Yeah. Well, okay, and I think the tabling would make sense if the applicant is willing to look at doing some of the things that we're asking. If the applicant is not, then I think that the applicant should have the ability to move on and get a determination from the council as to whether they agree with what we're talking about or not. And so let me turn to the applicant, to Mr. Harvey and Mr. Alvey. Given what we're just discussing here, if we're talking about tabling this recommendation or this application with the recommendation to look at reconfiguring some things that we just talked about, primarily the higher density, and then making the connection of 75 South through to Morning Mist, is that something that you would be willing to consider doing?
Thank you for everybody's feedback. Thank you, Quan. You have some applause from the Harvey household. We are wide open to reconfiguring the high density. We can concede and redraw the high density. The phase 1 lots 101 through 109 and not connecting is a sacred issue. And we would be inclined to move forward and take our chances with city council, even if the commission did not give their blessing. I appreciated Lyle's comments and referencing that, yes, this does meet the current ordinances, has been addressed and reviewed by the fire department. Personal opinion, I feel the commission is overstepping and wanting to try to force a connectivity on this issue, since we are meeting the current city's ordinances. But John, you can give any additional input, but that is Nathan Alvey's opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. Again, we've got 4 generations in this. This isn't something we've looked at lightly. This isn't something that we're coming in and selling out and piecing out. We're going to be here the next 50 years, plus. And so those 101 through 109, we've gone over dozens of drawings. We've gone over concepts, talked to neighbors, looked at connectivity. And this is what we've come up with. We've had the fire chief come out and walk through the field. And I'm not a lawyer yet, but eventually I will. And as far as I know, we're sticking to the ordinances as is. So that's what we're going with.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner,
I do have a question, guys. So first one is, again, going back to the density. So Josh, you mentioned that moving some of the density. Where are you talking about? Again, if you can be specific. I know you mentioned the Russell property, lot 3A and then 200 North.
I mean, yeah, it's a great question. I don't know where exactly would go or what it would look like. I mean, I would like to, I don't think we can, well, we can recommend this. I mean, I don't know that the city council would dictate this, but, almost a blank slate, starting with Morning Mist somehow going through 75 connecting to Morning Mist and possibly 75 also connecting up to 200 North, and then rearranging it however those various circulation patterns would dictate. So I guess the short answer is that's the important question, Quan, but I don't know, because I would have to sketch it out myself or let the professionals do that, but I think it could be done. It's just not exactly, it's not fitting the best layout the way I look at it now, in my opinion.
Yeah, not to throw in a wrench, but when I think about the quote unquote higher density lots and properties up against 200 North, I almost feel like it's kind of, and I'm trying to find a term here, but it's kind of, you're putting a lot of burden on some of these, for lack of a better term, and please correct me, some of these quote unquote lower income housing. Almost to me, it feels like some of these bigger lots should be up against 200 North and then along the Russell property. And then, yeah, I mean, if you want to look at from a fair perspective, but again, that's another point. I don't want to throw a wrench in there, but maybe the Harveys can think about that too. And again, I still don't know what it is. I mean, again, please remind me, what is the big deal about connecting 75 South to Morning Mist? And I don't say that in a derogatory way, but I've just been trying to figure out why. Somebody, whether it's you, Josh, or somebody refresh my memory, why we want to do that.
From my standpoint, and I just did a quick and dirty like Google Maps of this,
Yep.
But the current cul-de-sac bulb at the end of 75 South Street, say it's lot 12 on that drawing. So it has the home on it. To get from that house to Smith's is 1.4 miles.
Okay.
So you have to go down 75. You
Right.
have to turn north on Angel, go through the intersection, turn right up 200 North. And so thinking about pedestrian or bicycle connectivity in this area to the Denver Rio Grande Rail Trail, like that's going to make somebody they may be more inclined to just get in their car and drive to a trailhead rather than use their home as a trailhead because it's less direct of a route. And that also just has the effect of causing all of this now driving, this burden of traffic to migrate over to Morning Mist Lane. If there's ever a need for somebody to go north to south from Angel to 200, it's fewer connections, fewer roads. And if you jump over to the east side of I-15, if you look at the way all of our cities were platted for, decades, 100 years ago, they're platted with regular connections, regular intersections, reduction of cul-de-sacing. And I would argue that the east side of I-15 in the old regular connected subdivisions are not overrun with traffic, that those roads are generally driven by the homes that live along those roads. And so I think that it's a real, it's an opportunity. It's not like a relief valve. So it's just a chance for 75, for the people who live along 75 South Street would gain a direct connection to 200 North in many ways, instead of having to go west and now be those additional cars on Angel Street, those additional cars going through the Angel Street 200 North intersection, and then back east on 200 North to I-15. It would be a reduction of that whole leg of travel and just be a handful of cars that live in this subdivision coming out onto 200 North and missing that entire 1.5 miles of out and around circulation. So just for overall connectivity, it makes a lot of sense. And, you can go back. I don't know what the decision was made at like Wellington and Holmes Creek, but Wellington, for instance, on the west side, you can't get from 200 North to the junior high without putting kids out onto Angel Street, because Holmes Creek stops it, but there's 2 subdivisions that come 2 cul-de-sacs. And this is all over the west side it's all over modern subdivisions, but West Hillfield Road, for instance, dead ends into a subdivision that was approved at some point by some planning commission and council in Syracuse that stopped overall east-west connectivity for Western Davis County to a point that we're never going to get that back. And this is a minor issue. It's not something to fall on my sword over, but at the same time, every time we don't make a connection, it's one more lost opportunity. And these aren't coming around. They said, we're going to be here for 50 years. An average lifespan of a single family residence is 100+ years. We don't really even know, once that home goes down, we're not going to get that connectivity opportunity back. So looking at it from that standpoint, I don't remember who said it. Maybe it was Josh, but the folks on Morning Mist Lane who are constructing new homes, there's a number of people whose voices weren't even, didn't have the opportunity to even be heard because they're new homes. So I totally agree that we would get the folks on 75th South Street coming out against that connectivity, but I think the impacts would be minimal and the benefits would be great for family members who live along 75 South Street who want to have, people walk, ride a bike, or have a shorter drive up onto 200 North. And that's my opinion on connectivity there.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And then I also look at the current situation. Those folks are doing that drive right now. Why are we putting the onus on the applicants to provide an outlet? They don't have to do this. They can keep the land the way that they are. But I think they're giving us a great product, meeting our demands, general plans demands, SB 34, you name it. I guess that's the other question. Again, playing devil's advocate, because I agree, that would be nice, but if they don't want it, why are we forcing them?
Yeah, I think I'm with Quan. I think that we have to look at what has been proposed, and the applicant has asked us to decide on that.
Yep.
So I would like to make a motion to approve the rezone of the 14 acres of the property approximately 1773 West, 200 North, from A5 to the R110, R114, and the R16, and R2 with the PRUD overzone.
So are you saying, Toby, is your motion as it's configured, as it's currently shown?
Yes.
Okay, so despite the willingness of the applicant to look at reconfiguring the R2 part of that. All right, is there a second to that motion?
I second that.
That's from Quan. All right. Any further discussion to the motion?
I don't know if this is discussion on the motion or what. I think it's relevant to it, but so this is what this is my, here you go. This is what I'm talking about. Okay. This is just an idea. Okay. Here's 75 coming through. The pink is all accomplishing phase one of what the applicant's looking for. This is an option. I'm not saying it's the best option or the right option. I'm just saying you can accomplish what the applicant wants for phase one. Okay. You can take, instead of having all of the townhomes over in this corner, you can put all the blue is now townhomes up along 200. And then you take the R114, I guess, that's right up in the private cul-de-sac, and you swap that to over here. Now it's a little smaller, but it's the same idea. And so this allows all the same, I think you could still get most or close to the same lot numbers, density, all of those things. And you could accomplish connectivity. And you could allow phase one to start right away. So I'm not saying this is the best option, but I'm saying it is a very workable compromise that I think makes sense. Now,
Lyle, can we make Josh's screen bigger? Because I do want to take a look at that again. His color by the numbers.
Yeah, and I think what Josh is showing us is just a concept of how it could be done. Not that it necessarily has to be done that way, but it could be done that way. Just shows the ability to do some things differently.
So then, Josh, what are you saying about the motion right now? Should we amend it? What should we do? Because I do want that phase one to move forward.
Well, this is in effect, this something like this would require, I think, a tabling. So the motion's on the table, and I think we have to vote on it. But I just throw this out there because I hadn't got a chance to say it before the motion was made.
Well, yeah, we do have a motion and a second. Josh, you do have the ability that it is allowable to make a substitute motion.
Well, okay, then in I guess that case, I would make a substitute motion that we table the item so that it could be reconfigured, not not to go away from the general idea of it all. It's just redesign.
Is there an alternative that we can meet somewhere in between and allow the applicant to, like you said, start on phase one and deal with some of these other issues later on? I mean, they've been pretty patient.
Yeah, before we get to that, let me just, because Josh has put a substitute motion on the table. Let me ask if there's a second to that substitute motion.
I second it.
Jared seconds it. Okay, Quan, go ahead. I mean, you've asked the question about there can be some kind of a compromise or something reached on that.
Yeah, like I said, I'd like to get them to be able to start phase one. Is there any way that we can do that and still deal with the other issues?
I mean, it really depends on the willingness of the applicants, and from what they had indicated earlier, is that they're willing to work on about any of it, except they don't want to, they're not willing to connect 75 South through to Morning Mist.
Okay.
That seems to be the one hard item that they will insist on, and everything else they seem to be pretty flexible about.
Okay.
I know it's the middle of the planning commission discussion, Mr. Chair. There are some hands up from the applicant if there's interest. I don't know if it's appropriate at this time to accept that or not.
Commissioners, are you willing to hear some more from the applicant?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, let's go ahead.
Thank you. This is Nephi Harvey speaking. I don't know if you can put the map up that shows the larger parcel and showing 1700 South going out towards 200 North. But what I'd like to point out is that by providing a connection into Morning Mist and a further connection, yes, that one, a further connection that's future through the Anderson property, and the third connection going off 75 South up 1700 West that will be active in the next month's time, that is currently being developed. That will funnel 3 roads down towards 75 South. So 75 South will become a funnel connector off of 200 North for 3 separate roads at some point in the future. And in our discussions with the folks on 75 South, that's a primary concern of theirs. It's not that it's one or two, it's that that would cause three. And so what we're allowing for right now in this discussion, thank you for putting that map up. You can see the construction that's going off that over on 1700 West that's going to be connecting directly to 200 North in coming months' time. That construction's ongoing right now. It's been approved. It's happening. So again, what we're shooting for here, and what we've in our discussions with the neighbors and our own desires for the property, is to not create a funnel of 3 roads, and try and keep it down to 2 roads. And then for the near future and for the near term, it'll be 1 road connected directly to 75 South. And so I just want to point that out as a major objective of ours, and the concern that we have universally been lobbied for off of 75 South. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I guess I did have that question when I saw that and just haven't raised it. But my question was, is 1700 South is planned to connect through to 200 North? 1700 West, I'm sorry, 1700 West to connect through to 200 North. Sounds like it is.
Yes, it is. It's being connected right now.
Okay.
That's right where the Ovation development is going in right now. So yeah, it can.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Well, that does provide some of that connectivity.
I guess I do think that helps, but if we close off 75th South and don't connect it to Morning Mist, I do agree with what Mr. Harvey just said, in that it does provide 3 onto 75th South. But if we close off 75th South and we don't connect to the Morning Mist, then if you look at the broader map and you see 200 North and Angel, Morning Mist is almost, with a couple little bends, a straight shot to get down to Angel, closer to the open space by Webb Lane currently. So that will become a major thoroughfare, I think, a way more significant cut through, a shortcut from 200 North to the south portion of that portion of Angel than it would be if we connected 75th to Morning Mist. So
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it would. I do agree with what he just said. It would. Currently 75th South is the best. The current proposal is the best option for 75th South, but is it the best option for Morning Mist? And I don't think the answer to that is yes. So what's the compromise? What makes it balanced on 75th and Morning Mist? And the balance there is connecting.
Okay. Any other discussion, commissioners, to this motion, to the substitute motion at this point, which is to table and allow for some work to reconfigure the overall development?
I still have not heard any confirmation from the applicant that they want to consider our suggestions from being tabled, and they've had the opportunity to speak since we've put that up there. So I would say that they've asked us to vote on the what's been proposed, and so I guess I would like to go ahead and just vote on what they proposed.
I think I've heard them indicate that they're willing to consider the reconfigurations of the overall development, just not the connection of 75th through to Morning Mist. That's kind of what I've heard.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no further discussion, then I think we will take a vote at this point on the substitute motion. The substitute motion is to table, to allow for a redesign and reconfiguration of the overall development along the lines of what we've talked about. And, whether that will include a connection through to 75 South, I guess, let's do this. Well, let me think. I'm trying to think if I want to take a straw poll here of the commissioners about this connection of 75 South. That will give us an indication as to what the applicant needs to look at.
Good night.
as they look at the overall consideration. Josh?
So let me just throw something out there. I know I made the substitute motion, but I tend to somewhat agree with what Toby was saying. At the end of the day, practically speaking, what we're trying to do here is give the council something to chew on. So however our motion comes out, I think the message has been sent.
Right.
And whether they agree with our comments or not, at least they're out there. So no matter how, whether it was in favor or against or whatever, I think it sounds like the applicant would probably prefer to go on to the council, and then the council can chew on everything we've discussed. So maybe my comment boils down to the question, why can't we or shouldn't we vote on the original motion? Is it because I made the substitute?
Yeah, so if you want to withdraw your substitute, you can certainly do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, maybe I would like to hear from the applicant, but it sounds like they would prefer us to just push it on whether we recommend approval or denial, and then they go take their chances with what the council says. So if my assumption is correct from the applicant, I would withdraw my substitute motion.
Applicant, is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. This is Nephi Harvey. I'll just state it in longhand for you. Yes, we're willing to consider, because we have no immediate plans for the high density section. We're very willing to consider options and other ways to look for that, particularly the northeast corner of the development. For the lower part of the development and for tying into 75 South, we would like to proceed as presented with that proposal.
All right, very good. So Josh, let me ask you first, are you withdrawing your motion?
Yes.
Substitute motion? Okay, the substitute motion is withdrawn. We're back to the original motion, which was made by Toby to recommend the proposal for the rezone and the preliminary plat as shown, as submitted by the applicant.
Can I make a quick comment before we vote?
Yes, please, Quan.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We should give the applicant a chance at this vote. I also think that we should recommend this, because at the end of the day, you're right, some of those concerns are going to be brought up to the city council anyways. And then I'm also thinking that the applicant will definitely reach out to those folks on 75 and probably get their comments to the city council saying, yeah, we don't want a connection. But like I said, I want to give them some justice. I mean, like I said, I believe they've got a great product. Again, I'm just beating the drum again, but that's my comment.
My comment would be on this is as we take the vote, if you are voting against the motion, which is to approve it as it is, I think it might be appropriate for you to state why you're voting against it. That would give some guidance, I think, to the council.
Great.
As to what the rationale is because I think the applicant has expressed a willingness to reconfigure and redesign the overall development.
Yep.
They've really indicated a willingness to work with us and do a lot of things, but not that connection to 75 South. So if that's the bone of contention, then it would be good to identify that. And if that's the reason that you're voting no on this, it would be good to identify that. If you're voting no for other reasons, identify that as well.
And just a quick question, if I may. So let's say this motion gets, or whatever, the city council eventually passes it. Can we at a later time address that connectivity? Or is this the only time that we can address that connectivity?
We can address it at the preliminary plat.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess we're kind of voting on that right now.
Yeah, this is Lyle with staff. So in my opinion, the rezone and the development agreement certainly give you more leverage to discuss those kind of items. The preliminary plat, again, they'll meet the minimum standards. If you want something different than those, it becomes a little more challenging to request those. So this, I don't know that it's not feasible. It's certainly easier at this stage in the game.
Right. All right. Any other comments? Any other discussion? All right. So we are voting then on the motion to recommend to the council the rezone and the preliminary plat as indicated or as submitted by the applicant. So with that, let's take the vote. Jared, you're going to be up first.
I vote no because of interconnectivity and because of our ability to not see how the zoning would get reconfigured, which I think it's important to get the higher density closer to the main arteries where you have more people that could get on that artery to pick up public transportation and those types of things. We lose that opportunity if we agree. So for those reasons, I vote no.
Okay, thank you. Scott.
Thank you. So I'm really torn on this because I'm a huge advocate of a variety of housing types on the west side of Kaysville. I think that would be wonderful for my family, and I live out here too, and just having a broader variety is going to bring a whole different group of folks out here that I think we would really benefit from. I do feel strongly about the connectivity. I mean, I brought it up. It was one of the very first things that I noticed, and just want to thank the applicant for their willingness to reconfigure. I'm going to vote no, just because I would have liked to see another version of this or a fleshed out version of this before approving it, with at least some consideration of the connectivity. And I appreciate where you're coming from. I also appreciate that we're going to get those connections to 200 North, but I still think we're going to create a little triangle island down here that would have benefited from 75 connecting. So thank you. I love the product. I think this is going to be really good for Kaysville. I look forward to future iterations of it, but would vote no because of the connectivity issue.
Josh.
I will say amen to what Scott just said. And then I will add that I'll give you my vote in a second, but I'll add that I usually, and I think if I mean, those on the commission who've been with us every meeting, and if you followed my comments even back several years on the commission, I am in favor of density, as we always say, as a relative term in Kaysville. This is not that dense. I think this is needed. I think this is the right place for it. I think I generally try not to Mr. Alvey, I think's comment that we're overstepping our bounds. I generally am try very hard and be very cognizant about us not overstepping our bounds. And so I take our suggestion. I don't take our suggestion for connectivity lightly. I think that suggestion of connectivity is, while the current proposal might conform to minimum code requirements, in my opinion, it's not the best layout and it's not the best planning decision from a broader perspective. And so I would vote no and just suggest that we reconfigure and connect 75th to Morning Mist.
Hey, thanks, Josh. Quan.
Aye.
Quan votes aye. Steve.
I also vote no. I like the connectivity, and I echo what Josh and the others have said. And then I would like to see it reconfigured. I think it's a great product. I think it looks good. I don't want to vote on something until I see the final product.
I'm up next. I will vote no. I'm voting no because I think the applicant has expressed the willingness to reconfigure. I think the reconfiguration needs to be shown before we know what the boundaries of that zoning will be. And I also feel like that there's an important issue with the connectivity, one that needs to be considered. I think Josh's point about while the people along 75 South may express opposition to the connectivity, the people on Morning Mist may very well express the opposite. sentiment once they understand the implications of it. So I think there needs to be some further discussion about that. I also think that we need to get some additional clarification from the sewer district with regard to the density that's being proposed here and why they feel like they cannot support it, because that's going to be key. So as I indicated, I vote no. And Toby?
Aye.
Toby votes aye. All right, on 5-2 vote, the motion fails. Or actually the motion fails, which means that there is not a positive recommendation. And at this point, we have no recommendation. Is there any other motions that the commission would like to consider?
So I suppose I'll make a motion. I will make a motion that I'll try to reflect what I think the 5 votes were saying. And that is, we would recommend denial of the proposal as given. However, that's not to say we're against it in principle. It's just that there should be a refining. So if we want to move it on, I'm not going to make motion to table it. I'm just going to make a motion to deny, subject to the reconfiguring we've talked about and the connectivity issue, and then allow the applicant to move on as they desire.
Yeah, so that's the motion by Josh. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Steve is seconded. Now discussion. I would agree. I mean, I think it really seems like the more appropriate thing to do for this, given everything that we need to look at on this, would be to table and work with the applicant. But given that we have at least one intractable issue, in order to allow the applicant to move forward and get some resolution on this issue, this may be the most appropriate way to go, which is to actually recommend denial. But I think we need to make sure that we express to the council, we're not denying the concept of the subdivision.
That's correct.
We fully support what they're trying to do here. The issue really seems to be just 1 or 2 items. And in order to get some resolution to those items, we are recommending the denial and then allowing the council to weigh in on this. Any other discussion to this motion?
Well said.
All right, then let's begin the vote. Scott, you were first. And Scott bailed out. No, there he is. Scott, are you there? Well, we lost you. There you go.
I'm here. The Zoom meeting went away and then came back. So was I the only one that bailed out?
Yeah, you're back though. So how do you vote?
So this is on the denial, but we like the approach, and yeah, so I will vote yes to that motion.
Okay, yes. Josh?
Aye.
Aye. Quan?
Aye.
Aye. Steve?
Aye.
Aye. I vote aye. Toby?
Aye.
Toby votes aye. And Jared?
Aye.
Jared votes aye. Wow, we have a unanimous vote there. Great. All right, to the applicant, what I would say is and you've heard the discussion, you're well aware, we don't dislike what you're proposing. We think it's a good concept. We like the overall theme of the development and what you're proposing to do. We just think it needs some tweaking. And then, of course, we have the one really big issue, I guess, which is the connection of 75 to Morning Mist. So with that, this can move forward to the council, and then we can get some, hopefully get some resolution from the council on some of these issues, and then be able to move forward with this. So, okay. Anything else? Anyone else have on this? I think we're done on this item. Hey, thank you very much, all. All right. Let's move on to our next agenda item. Hang on, folks, I got to get there. Here we go. All right, we have another public hearing for a rezone of 1.5 acres of property of 1480 Willow Drive from R120, along with the PRUD overlay for Well, I said the 1480 Willow Drive. The applicant is James Nooner. Lyle.
Good. And then I would also recommend, Mr. Chair, the following two items are again regarding the same property. So we're considering the rezone for the purpose of allowing a lot on a private street.
Right.
We'll also be looking at preliminary and final plat together, essentially going straight towards final plat. And I'll introduce all those together if that is appropriate according to you.
So we are doing a rezone and a preliminary plat on this one as well. Is that right?
Correct. And we're also considering the final plat at this point on a single lot. We felt the staff were ready to look at that detail as well.
Oh, that would be lot 1.
Right.
Okay. All right.
So to introduce all of that, the property here, not far from where we were just talking, across the street next to Smith's Marketplace on the west side of the rail trail, there's an existing home at the end of cul-de-sac at Willow Drive on roughly 1.5 acres. And they're interested in doing an additional lot behind them. The lot would actually access what's under development now. Someone referenced it as the green property. I forget the actual name of the subdivision. The applicant can tell us what it's ended up with, but they have a private street that loops along the perimeter of the development, brushes up against this lot. You'll see it on the plat in a moment. That would access just one more lot. So they would maintain the R120 zone. Simply, they're asking for the PRUD again because it's accessed via a private street rather than a public right-of-way. And you can see here the existing home on the left side, lot number 2. The new lot labeled lot number 1 would again front and access this public street. I think it's called Wooden Shoe Lane is here just south of that property line. They've been in coordination and cooperation with the developer of that project. On the lot, they've shown the easements and such that take care of the gas lines along the east side of the property and are looking for a 20-foot setback off of Wooden Shoe Lane, which is accounted for within the PRUD, if that's acceptable to the Planning Commission. So we'd be looking again for 3 things: a consideration of the PRUD. Is it okay to have a lot off a private street? The preliminary plat, which is also a recommendation. And then we would be considering the final plat subject to the council's decision on the PRUD and preliminary plat. Now we threw a lot at you, but on this single lot with an existing street or at least one under construction, it felt prudent to combine them together and procedurally take care of it in one meeting rather than the applicant coming back. So with that, I do know the applicant's available for comments or questions as well, and I'll close my remarks with that.
Okay, does the commission have any questions of staff? Not hearing anybody? Okay, let's go to the applicant. Mr. Bailey.
So I have Mr. Nooner, the owner of the property that's working with them. Looks like he's raising his hand.
Great,
now, sir, you're welcome to address the commission once you're unmuted.
Hi, thanks for staying late for us tonight. You actually have Blake Bailey and I'm here together. We don't have a lot to add to what Lyle said. We did walk into the buzzsaw with the whole Green Manor thing, so it was entertaining to watch. I don't know about entertaining, but it was interesting to watch the last discussion. We're excited with what we ended up with, adjacent to our property relative to. We think it's going to be a nice development, and we think this lot is a nice addition to that, and will actually provide, as a single half-acre lot, provides a buffer between that higher density and the remainder of the neighborhood. I guess I would say, are there any questions for us?
All right, thanks. Commissioners, any questions of the applicant? Okay.
This isn't a question as much as a comment, but I actually love this concept. In looking at the aerial image, it looks like the home off of the subdivision or off of the cul-de-sac has long had that property line as their area where it looks like they enjoy their backyard. So this has been leftover property. It's in some ways intensifying in place. It's, you know, utilizing land that is underutilized currently. It's maximizing the investment in another subdivision with an existing road connection. I think this is great. The question, Lyle asked a specific question about the 20-foot front yard setback. Wooden Shoe Way, that subdivision predates me on the planning commission. So I would just ask what its across the street neighbors would have for a front yard setback, and if that's going to create one inconsistent property, or if it's creating consistency.
Yeah, I can address that, Mr. Chair. I think, and Commissioner Hess. My recollection is that subdivision has reduced setback similar to this. It's either 20 feet, but I think they may actually have a 15-foot to a porch situation and 20 feet to garage type setback on that subdivision to the south. So this would be fairly consistent with that type of development.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions from the commissioners of the applicant? All right, this is also a public hearing. So we will now turn to the public. Again, we received some emails on this with some comments, and they'll be entered into the record. For those who are here to comment on this, again, we ask you to make your comments succinct and to the point. We're getting late and everybody's getting punchy, but we do welcome and invite your comments, and we will open up now for those comments with regard to this proposal, which would be for the rezone, the preliminary plat, and the final plat. Well, we don't need the public hearing for the final plat, but for the preliminary as well. All right, Lyle, have we got any speakers?
Yeah, we have very few people left. I don't see any hands, but just one quick reminder, if you are interested, please raise your hand on the screen, and that'll indicate to us that you're interested in addressing the commission. Maybe give you just 5 seconds here to do that. Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anyone indicating interest to speak to this item.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing on this. Invite or see if the applicant has any further comments.
You know, we're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, commissioners, back to you. Discussion and/or motion.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
So Lyle, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we first make a motion to recommend approval of the PRUD overlay zone. Then do we have to get a second and vote on that first, Lyle?
I think that's the cleanest way to do it, is to
I would
put it up into 3 parts.
Okay.
So is anyone willing to make the motion then on the rezone for the PRUD overlay?
So that was my motion, that we recommend approval of the PRUD overlay.
All right, Josh has made that motion. Is there a second?
I'll make the second.
Steve. Okay, Steve makes the second. Any further discussion to that motion? If not, let us begin the vote. Josh.
Aye.
Quan.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
I vote aye. Toby.
Aye.
Jared.
Aye.
And Scott.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Now we're on to the preliminary plat. Lyle, can we do the preliminary and final together, with the final being subject to the preliminary plat approval by the council?
I'm okay with that.
All right. So we're looking for a motion to approve the preliminary and final plats for this subdivision as submitted in the application, with the stipulation that the final plat is subject to approval of the preliminary plat by the council.
So
I'll make that motion.
Con makes that motion. And where was the second?
Me, Josh.
Josh has seconded it. All right. Any further discussion to that motion? All right. Let's begin the vote. Quan.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
I vote aye. Toby.
Aye.
Jared.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
And Josh.
Aye.
All right. Unanimous. And that takes care of that one. So thank you very much to the applicants. It looks like we got through that one in record time. All right, our next item is a final plat approval for the Horn subdivision at 1422 South Sunset Drive. Just a reminder that we are the final approvers on this. This will not go on to the council. And that final plats are usually just kind of a formality, making sure that all of the issues that were identified and addressed in the preliminary plat have been taken care of. And all of the legal forms are now completed and taken care of. So with that, Lyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this property was considered for the R1LD and PRD zone fairly recently to allow for the flag lot type development. As the applicants honed in as to where they really want to draw that line and fine tune the plat, they prepared a final plat that's before you, which indicates similar to what was shown at the preliminary plat. One lot with the existing home up against Sunset Drive, and then a new lot called Lot 2, which would be accessed off of Sunset via a 30-foot flag stem. They both meet and well exceed the minimums for the zone. It's well under the 2 units per acre, where they determined to only go with 2 total lots. And we've been working with them. There's already curb gutter and sidewalk along Sunset Drive for this particular location. But before the city does continuation of the Sunset project we worked on last year and the improvements to the south of Western Drive, hoping to get utility stubs to that property line for this owner ahead of that project, so we're not digging up a new road. Otherwise, with that, it's fairly straightforward. From a technical standpoint, staff's ready to recommend the approval of the final plat.
So Lyle, all of the, they always ask us, but I'm sure it wouldn't be here. All of the requirements of the preliminary plat have been met with this?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? All right. We can go to the applicant and see if the applicant has any comments.
Okay. Don't know if we still have the applicant with us.
Yeah, right.
And they did mention ahead of time that they may be out of town, so I think they might have been looking for other representations. If there's someone to represent them that wants to speak, please let us know.
If there's someone out there that would like to speak to this, but it's not necessary. I think this is a pretty perfunctory action. So is there anyone out there, Lyle? That's it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anyone interested in comments on this item.
All right, then let's go turn this back to the commission, commissioners. Any other discussion on this for the final plat? If not, we're ready for a motion.
I'll make the motion.
All right, Steve has made the motion to approve the final plat for the Horn subdivision. Is there a second?
Second it.
Second by?
Jared.
Jared. Any other discussion to the motion? Let us vote. Steve.
Aye.
I vote aye. Toby.
Aye.
Jared.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Josh.
Aye.
And Quan.
Aye.
All right, unanimous vote. The final plat is approved. Thank you very much. And our last agenda item is a public hearing for consideration of an ordinance enacting subsection 1957, the technical specifications and drawings of chapter 19.5 subdivision standards of the revised ordinances of Kaysville City. Lyle will tell us about this. This is basically all of our engineering standards and design standards that we have for subdivisions, which are required to be adopted by ordinance. And so, of course, an ordinance, land use ordinance, needs to be recommended upon by the Planning Commission. So that's what we're doing. Lyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I won't go into the many pages that are in your packet. We've had those for your review. You can see there's a lot of specifications as to the depth of concrete, angles and curves, and types of materials are used, compaction and so forth, how infrastructure's built by developers and others as the city grows and expands. Our Public Works Director, Mr. Josh Belknap, is attending the meeting. If there are more specific questions of him, he's available to answer those. Primarily per the, as stated by the chair, this is something that we've had, probably a little less specific, but reflects a lot of what we're doing currently. We have the standards, we have standard drawings that when people come in to develop, we'll have them follow. But this codifies it as the state is interested in, so that does a couple things. They know where to find it, and also so that it's not ever changing on them without a formal process by the council to approve that and help set expectations. Probably one key thing as well is encourage or outline something that we've adopted a while back in our required improvements from a subdivision, being a conduit for communications. The way it's adopted currently simply said as referenced by the standard drawings, and that is a detail that hasn't been in there that's included with this, specifically for fiber type infrastructure or other similar communications and conduit. So I think that about sums it up. We're looking for a recommendation to pass it forward to the council. This is something that has been worked on exhaustively. It's pretty complex and there's a lot of it. So it may be something that's tweaked over time as we run into things, but we're simply looking to get that on the books and forwarded to the council. And again, happy to take questions, or happy to have Mr. Belknap speak to other issues if you have questions as well.
All right, thank you. Are there questions of staff with regard to this? It's all pretty technical stuff.
I'll make a comment, not a question. I had to do this in Morgan County when I worked up there because we went through this issue with fiber connectivity. This is pretty boilerplate, but it codifies what has to be in the ground and where it lives. And most municipalities are being forced to do this, but it makes sense in the long run because it's the specification of where it goes every time you build and every time you put something in the ground.
Right. Any other comments or questions of the staff?
I'll just make a comment that this does help to reduce and simplify for everyone that builds in this area what's expected of them. So I applaud this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that every community has, and it's just it's one of those technical backup things that you really need to have. Sometimes there are controversial things in there, but at this point, I've not heard of anything. So okay. If there are no other comments or questions, this is a public hearing. So let's open the public hearing and see if there is anyone here that wishes to comment on this. Lyle?
Okay, I'll just remind anyone at this time that wishes to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. There are just a few of you left, so give you just a moment to do so. Not seeing any interest on this item so far, Mr. Chair. It looks like that.
Okay, then let's go ahead and close the public hearing. Turn it back to the commission. Any other questions or comments on this, commissioners? Or discussion? And if not, we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
All right, who wants to take this one?
I'll make a motion that we recommend the ordinance enacting subsection 19-5-7 technical specifications and drawings of chapter 19-5 subdivision standards of title 19 subdivisions and revised ordinance and case bills for recommendation to the city council.
Steve has made the motion to recommend adoption of this ordinance. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
That's Juan has seconded that. Any other discussion to the motion?
Juan is
right.
fast.
What's that?
Juan is very fast.
Like a buzzer, I feel red buzzer so I can jam it.
You would do well on Jeopardy. Okay, let's go ahead and vote. I will be first. I vote aye. Toby?
Aye.
Jared?
A big aye.
All right. Scott? Josh?
Aye.
Quan,
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
All right, we have a unanimous vote to recommend this onto the council. Thank you. And then Lyle, are we, we're doing the amendment to the Kaysville City Annexation Policy Plan. Go ahead.
Okay, just very brief. Our power department in particular just wanted to ensure any areas that are considered in the future, that it be very clear to them that we're interested in having those served by Kaysville City Power. The existing version of the annexation policy plan speaks to that a little bit, more in the realm of how services are provided be considered. But the language under the proposal essentially that was key is that municipal service that are needed and all properties included in any future annexation shall be served by all Kaysville City utilities. And so that was the primary reason for this. I show the map, I thought that would be of the interest of the commission that shows areas that are likely to be considered to be annexed into Kaysville over time. That's primarily the Mutton Hollow Township there in the big green area in the top right. This is not being proposed for change of any fashion. We've done the noticing to affected entities around, taxing entities, other cities, and so forth of this. I've not received any comment or feedback from them with any, including Rocky Mountain Power, opposition or support one way or the other at this point. So we're looking for a recommendation from the commission, and the city council will actually hold a public hearing on this before they make their final decision to the proposal.
So Lyle, we're proposing to amend the plan to include the green areas in the annexation policy?
Well, no, so I probably confused with a little bit with the map. Nothing is changing on this map. So I just thought it'd be of interest to the commission to see what it is. Not something we talk about very often. This text is the only proposed change from the prior document. Your packet has the previous version. I only put the proposed version in the PowerPoint. And it's just those 1 through 6 items. We've added a couple in there specifying that we want them to connect to our utilities to set that expectation.
Okay, so it's this language. All right, very good. Commissioners, any discussion on this?
Just real quick, if you'll know, 3 years ago, the legislature pushed forward and said they wanted the county statewide to start closing down these unincorporated areas within the cities over the next, long time. They want it done. And so the county's interest, and I hear this every day, is to incorporate these areas and annex them in the city. So this is good forward work. Jeff Whaler would cry if we ever took Mutton Hollow over from him.
But at least it's in our plan. All right, yeah, good comment. Any other comments, commissioners? Any questions? All right, is someone ready to make a motion to recommend adoption of this policy? Y'all need some time to look it over? You want to wait on this and address it, or what's your pleasure?
I think that it makes sense to me. I'm willing to make a motion to recommend the changes that have been made or that have been proposed for the next annexation policy plan.
Okay, Toby's made a motion. Is there a second?
Can I make a second?
Yes, Quan. Yes, Quan, you can. All right, so the motion and a second to recommend adoption of these amendments to the policy plan. Is there any further discussion by the commission, sorry. I'm promoting you all. Hearing no discussion, let's take a vote. Toby.
Aye.
Jared.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
Josh.
Aye.
Quan.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So we have recommended those changes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Let's make a call to the public. Lyle, do we have anyone out there that's still with us and would like to address us?
We have one esteemed member of the public who is one of our alternates to the Planning Commission. I don't know if she wishes to say anything. Otherwise, everybody is doing what we want to be doing and probably already asleep.
So we're not, nobody there. Since we're on this a little bit, I'm going to turn, Steve called and talked to me a little bit about a concern that he has or an issue of interest to him. And Steve, recognizing the late hour, but you might just want to throw this out and get a little bit of a reaction if you'd like to do that.
So I've done some research on this. We are one of the last, from what I understand, 3 cities in the county that still has a flag lot ordinance. Everybody around us, Farmington, Fruit Heights, Layton, all the cities have done away with their flag lot ordinances. I would like to propose that we amend our flag lot ordinance and do away with it and go to a 2-acre minimum with PRUD overlay. And then as a caveat to that, do a ADU allowance in the city as part of our general plan revision. So let's just chew on it, think about it, but that's what I'd like to propose to go to.
So I don't think we want to obviously don't want to discuss that tonight. We're all about ready to turn into pumpkins. But what's your feeling on this? Is this something that you think is worthy to put on an agenda and have a discussion about, our flag lot ordinance and our ADU ordinance?
I do. I agree.
So looks like I'm getting a lot of nods. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Lyle, I guess what the direction for you would be then on a upcoming agenda to put these on for discussion by the commission and see if we want to move forward making any recommendations to the council on these.
Okay, be happy to do that.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, Lyle, what else? You want to give us an update on the general plan update? What's happening there?
Yeah, so just very briefly, we're starting to get feedback from the community on that. Our consultant gave us an update recently that indicated, I think we've had about 3,000 people or so look at our lab's website, but very few of them are leaving comments or taking the survey. So I'm going to get it wrong, but we have something like 150 comments on our map, at least from 150 different people, and about 82 people who have done the questionnaire. So we need to keep pushing to get the community involved. And hopefully you guys have all looked at it and taken it. And if not, please do so. Encourage members of your family, friends, neighbors to do it. We're going to continue advertising it. Apparently it's on a lot of people's radar. They've kind of peeked at it. I don't know if what we're asking for is too lengthy of a time frame for them to spend it to get involved. But I think generally within 10 minutes, if you left a comment or two on the map, answered the questionnaire, the visual preference survey is meant to be very quick. You like something, just encourage the community to participate. Anyone who has ideas on how to spread the word out, we've got a few other things we haven't used yet that we're working on to keep it on everyone's radar. So just appreciate any support you have with that.
Great, thanks, Lyle. Any comments from the commissioners about the general plan update? Have you all gone on the website, taken a look at it, done the survey?
I was actually just looking at it, and I was just surprised, and I guess not surprised, but I'm happy with the balance of comments east to west and north to south. So while there may not be a ton of comments, and I've gone on and I've just liked and disliked a bunch of comments, so I haven't added too many of my own, but it looks like it's a pretty good distribution, it looks like, across the city, with the exception of really the old central city part of town from like 6th East down to Maine. There's nothing in there, but maybe those folks are fine with what's going on. But it's not too heavy in one spot. It's not like one neighborhood has really latched onto this and put 100 comments in one little pocket.
Yeah.
So it looks good to me.
Good. If you haven't done so, encourage you to get online and take a look at this, and then talk to your neighbors and friends and get them to get on there as well. Provide input. That's we want to get as broad an input from the public as we can. And then, of course, at some point later this year, we will be, as a planning commission, making the considerations and the recommendations on what that general plan update ought to be onto the council. So big responsibility we have there. Okay, Lyle, what else?
I think that's the crux of it. So we're back again in 2 weeks. My current anticipation, I checked the governor's executive order just to ensure, I believe we still have the capability to meet like this. We don't exactly have a home yet still. I will continue testing the pulse on that. I think Davis Tech is our best option if we are ready to start meeting in person. But I anticipating we're probably going to continue in this format. The city hall, where we'll have more obviously full control over, we're probably talking mid-July. And that's probably a question for us tonight, and at least to start considering. Historically, the Planning Commission has not met the first meeting in July. It tends to be a time where a lot of people are out of town and there's some conflicts. But just look at your calendars. I don't know if that's going to be necessary this year or not. We can continue meeting and continue doing business, but let us know if there are enough conflicts, and that's something that we can consider.
You know, Lyle, when I looked at the calendar, our first meeting in July is almost a week after the 4th. And I think that one seems okay. It's the second meeting I would have more concerns about because it's on the 23rd and the holiday's on the 24th. And so I think we might be better served to skip the second meeting in July rather than the first. What do you all think?
I would second that.
Okay, why don't we shoot for skipping the second meeting in July? As far as our next meeting, so is the possibility there for us to meet in person, to go back to our regular old format, or are we not really ready to do that yet?
So I think it's an option. The council did it at their last meeting, and the police were there and had to help regulate how many people were in there. We had to spread it out.
Farmington City did the same thing.
So
they're not meeting in person at this point.
Yeah, Farmington City is meeting in person. And Farmington City is doing it where they're meeting. They're videoing half the room into the senior center across, and then the other half. So not having as many people, but they're splitting it.
What commissioners, what's your pleasure? Do you ready to go back to having in-person meetings?
I like the way that it is right now. I mean, and then just thinking about the logistics that we're putting on other departments, I'm good with it right now.
Staying the way we are on Zoom. You want to stay with the Zoom meetings then? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I think that'd be prudent right now. Just with the increase of cases as things have opened up, it might be kind of premature to start doing public meetings, in my opinion.
So stay with Zoom.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
I'm on the state phone call every Thursday, and they talked about the largest number of increase in cases has been the meat packing plants up in Cache County, and then there's one other county down south, but they anticipate that the increase in cases has come because of Memorial Day. The meat packing plant was the largest increase in the state, but it's tracking where they thought it would track based on opening it up.
Well, if that's the case, then let's at least for our next meeting plan on the Zoom meeting again then, Lyle. We'll just do it this way for the next one, and then we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, we'll continue looking so that as soon as we're more comfortable that we're ready to move right into a meeting location if it is prior to City Hall being ready. So I'll keep that pulse. I think other than that, my final thing is I just shot over an email and with the training opportunity. I'll continue as I see those to just put that on your radar. If anyone sees anything and has interest in learning about opportunities, let me know. I can filter it through email, or you can mention it at these meetings. Certainly want to encourage training for you to help you in your position.
Great. Yeah, just and as a note, the League of Cities and Towns, they have been starting doing online video training on Land Use 101, if anyone is interested in that. They're doing that on Thursdays at noon. They've had 2 sessions so far. They're planning, I think, another 2 sessions. They've recorded those sessions, and you can see those for the 2 that you have missed at this point. So just go on to the League website, and under their land use tab, land use training, you can find those there. I just want to say, we had a tough one tonight. That was a good discussion. there's no problem in having differing opinions. That's what we're here for. That's, you know, that's how we get issues talked about and resolved. And there may not be a clear-cut answer to some of these things. And so I think we handled it pretty well. And I really appreciate everyone's opinion and everyone's approach to this. And I think I really appreciate the way that we're all kind of interacting with each other. And so I just would encourage us that we continue to do that, because I think it was a good way for us to go about and deal with a pretty difficult case. It'll be interesting to see, you know, it's pretty non-traditional, non-standard the way we went down on this. So it'll be interesting to see what the council does with this. And I think I'm going to try to, Lyle, if you'll let me know when the council is going to consider this, because I think I'd like to be there and give them some background. And I would encourage any of the other of you who that might want to be there as well to do that too, so that we can just give them a little bit of the flavor of the discussion and where we're at. But we're not at each other's throats about this. We just have some differing ideas, and it's really up to the council to tell us what direction to go at this point on some of these.
I agree.
Perhaps
I'd also like to be notified, Lyle.
Yeah, well, let me give you the first notice and then I will confirm as things go forward. I suspect it will be 3 weeks out. I don't think I'm going to be able to get all these items on for the 18th, would be the upcoming meeting.
Right.
I have heard that the sewer district will be presenting to the council to discuss some things on their system on the 18th. So partly because of this application and what they've seen, they wanted to talk to the council about it. So that could be of interest to you to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't anticipate that this specific rezone request will be ready at that same date. So,
okay. Is the council meeting live at their next meeting?
I believe so. I think they're going to continue with the in-person meetings.
Okay. All right.
But I'd be happy to pass along the details of that meeting to the commission as they come together.
That'll be interesting as well. All right. Well, anything else? Anything any of you commissioners have? Appreciate you all sticking with us and being willing to do this. And these are interesting times we live in right now, folks. And it's just interesting to see the pace of development. And we don't have that much land left in Kaysville to develop, and it's moving right along. We're not going to have much left to do here in a short while, and that's not completely true, because we'll be doing some redevelopment in this community sometime soon as well. So important what we're doing here on the general plan. Okay, I think we're ready for a motion to dismiss, adjourn.
Make the motion.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. No discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are dismissed. Thanks all. And I guess we will see you as a group again in 2 weeks. Online. We'll still be doing our next one online. Thanks all.
Thanks.
Yes.